The wheel of time turns slowly over the ancient lands of Bharatavarsha, where mighty rivers carve their paths through kingdoms that rise and fall like waves upon an eternal shore. Yet in the northern reaches, where the Sarayu River flows like molten silver beneath perpetual sunshine, stands a city that seems touched by the gods themselves, Ayodhya, jewel of the Ikshvaku dynasty, where prosperity and righteousness walk hand in hand through streets paved with good fortune. King Dasharatha surveys his domain from the highest tower of his palace, watching caravans snake along distant roads like golden serpents bringing tribute from vassal kingdoms. Merchants hawk their wares in markets that never sleep, their voices creating a symphony of commerce that reaches even these royal heights. Children race through flower-strewn courtyards while their mothers sing ancient hymns, and scholars debate philosophy in groves where peacocks strut between marble fountains. Everything a king could desire spreads before him like an endless feast, save for the one treasure that gold cannot purchase nor conquest secure. No son calls him father. No heir prepares to inherit this magnificent realm. 3 queens grace his household, each beautiful beyond mortal measure, each wise beyond her years. Kausalya, his first wife, carries herself with dignity that would shame goddesses, her every gesture reflecting the nobility of her lineage. Kaikeyi, daughter of the warrior king who once saved the monarch's life in battle, possesses both physical courage and keen intelligence that makes her invaluable counsel in matters of statecraft. Sumitra, gentle yet strong, brings harmony to the royal family through wisdom that sees beyond surface appearances to deeper truths. Yet their wombs remain empty while seasons pass in endless succession. The palace chambers echo with unspoken longings, and court astrologers whisper of curses that might explain this cruel irony. A king who can command armies, but cannot command life itself to bless him with children. Prayers rise like incense from every temple in Ayodhya as subjects join their ruler's desperate hope. The kingdom's future hangs in balance more precarious than any military campaign. For what use are mighty walls and vast treasuries if no prince exists to inherit them? Without sons, even the greatest dynasty crumbles to dust, leaving only faded legends in place of living power. Desperation drives the king to seek counsel from the wisest sages, scattered throughout forests beyond his capital, like stars across night sky. Their advice proves unanimous. Only heavenly intervention can break whatever forces prevent the birth of heirs. The gods themselves must be propitiated through sacrifice so profound that heaven cannot ignore mortal supplication. Sage Rishyasringa, renowned throughout the world for his ritual knowledge and sanctity, agrees to perform the Putra Kameshti Yajna, a ceremony so ancient and complex that few Brahmins dare attempt it. The ritual requires perfect precision in every detail, from the sacred fire's kindling to the final oblation, for the slightest error could bring wrath instead of blessing. Preparations consume months as craftsmen construct altars, according to specifications handed down from the age of creation itself. Gold and precious gems, rare herbs gathered from mountain peaks where eagles fear to soar, ghee from cows that have never known harsh words. Every element must achieve absolute purity, worthy of celestial attention. The sacrifice ground becomes a geometric mandala, carved from the earth itself, its patterns mirroring arrangements that connect mortal realm to heavenly spheres. When the auspicious day arrives, determined by calculations involving planetary positions and stellar configurations known only to the most learned astronomers, Ayodhya holds its collective breath. Smoke from the sacred fire rises straight as a pillar toward heaven, while mantras older than recorded history vibrate through air thick with expectation. The king himself feeds the flames with offerings prepared according to scriptural requirements, his heart pounding with hope and terror in equal measure. The heavens respond. Flames that had burned steady as mountains suddenly leap skyward with colors that have no earthly names, and from their midst emerges a figure radiance makes noon seem dim. The celestial being bears a golden vessel containing payasam, sacred rice pudding blessed by Vishnu himself, creator and sustainer of all existence. Share this among your queens according to their merit, the messenger declares, his voice carrying harmonics that resonate in listeners' souls. The Lord of the universe has heard your prayers, O king, and will grant you sons who shall illuminate the three worlds. The monarch distributes the celestial gift with trembling hands, giving half to Kausalya as his chief queen, 1/4 to Kaikeyi for her father's service to his throne, and the remaining portion to Sumitra, beloved for her gentle nature. The queens consume their shares with reverence approaching worship, feeling essence flow through their bodies like liquid starlight. Months pass while the kingdom waits in suspension between hope and fulfillment. Then, on a day when spring celebrates its victory over winter's harsh dominion, labor pains begin. The royal physicians and midwives rush through palace corridors as servants prepare chambers for births that will determine the realm's destiny. Kausalya delivers first, her son emerging as dawn breaks over Ayodhya's golden spires. The child's beauty defies description, skin dark as rain clouds that bring life to parched earth, eyes bright as lotus petals touched by morning dew, limbs perfectly formed as if crafted by celestial sculptors. More importantly, an aura of peace emanates from the infant that calms every heart in his presence. This is the prince who will someday embody righteousness itself. Hours later, Sumitra brings forth twins, contrasting natures complement each other like day and night. Lakshmana possesses fierce intensity that promises unwavering loyalty to whatever cause claims his devotion, while Shatrughna radiates gentle strength that will serve his family through wisdom rather than warfare. Both boys display the physical beauty characteristic of heavenly incarnation, but their qualities of spirit surpass even their remarkable appearance. Kaikeyi's son arrives as noon reaches its peak, his birth marked by auspicious signs that astrologers interpret as omens of future greatness. Bharata combines his mother's intelligence with his grandfather's military prowess, creating a prince talented enough to serve the kingdom well, whether in council chamber or battlefield. 4 sons, each representing 1/4 of Vishnu's essence incarnated to restore balance when evil threatens to overwhelm good. The gods themselves have taken human form to walk among mortals, though this cosmic truth remains hidden even from the boys themselves until destiny reveals their true nature. Ayodhya explodes in celebration that continues for weeks. Every street corner hosts musicians celebrating the dynasty's continuation, while merchants distribute sweets to crowds that dance until exhaustion claims them. Temples overflow with devotees offering thanksgiving prayers, and even nature seems to rejoice as flowers bloom out of season while rivers run clearer than crystal. The boys grow with supernatural rapidity while displaying talents that astound their tutors. The eldest masters archery with such skill that he can split arrows in flight, yet his greatest weapon proves to be his character, absolute adherence to truth and justice that makes even hardened warriors weep with admiration. His beauty draws crowds wherever he walks, but his nobility of spirit attracts followers who would die rather than disappoint him. Lakshmana shadows his elder brother like a devoted guardian, learning the same lessons while developing complementary skills that make them an invincible team. His devotion provides strength where mercy might weaken, His decisive action complements patient counsel. Their bond transcends normal sibling affection to become something approaching mystical unity. Bharata and Shatrughna develop their own inseparable friendship while mastering arts of kingship that their different temperaments approach from unique angles. Bharata excels in diplomacy and administration, solving complex problems through patient negotiation, while Shatrughna prefers direct action that cuts through obstacles like a sword through silk. All four receive education befitting their royal status, studying under masters knowledgeable in every branch of learning, from statecraft to philosophy. They memorize scriptures, practice weaponcraft, learn mathematics and astronomy, study history and theology, and master arts both practical and decorative. Yet their true education comes from observing their father's rule, watching how righteousness can govern even the most powerful kingdom. Years pass in golden succession. As the boys mature into young men, reputation spreads beyond Ayodhya's borders. Neighboring kingdoms seek alliances through marriage proposals, while distant rulers arrive bearing gifts and requesting audiences with youths. Fame has reached their courts. The eldest especially attracts attention, his combination of physical prowess and depth, creating a legend that grows with each telling. Then comes the ascetic arrival, will transform the boy's comfortable palace existence into something far more challenging and ultimately more glorious. Sage Vishvamitra, once a mighty king himself before renouncing worldly power for achievement, approaches the court with a request that initially seems simple, but carries implications no mortal can foresee. The sage's appearance commands immediate respect, tall and austere, with eyes that seem to hold starlight and a bearing that suggests authority over forces beyond human comprehension. He represents power at its apex. His very presence makes the ornate throne room seem inadequate, as if energies require larger spaces than mere architecture can provide. Great King, the ascetic addresses the monarch with courtesy that acknowledges royal status while maintaining superiority. I require assistance for a sacred task. My ashram suffers constant attacks from demons who disrupt sacrificial rituals, essential for maintaining order. I need warriors pure enough to enter consecrated ground, skilled enough to defeat supernatural enemies, and noble enough to serve righteousness without thought of personal reward. The king's response reveals both his devotion to Dharma and his paternal anxiety. My entire army stands at your disposal, revered teacher. Take whatever forces you require to protect your holy work. Armies cannot enter my ashram, the sage replies with a slight smile that suggests hidden knowledge. This task requires individuals' purity, matches their physical courage. I ask for your son to accompany me. The request strikes like a physical blow. His beloved eldest child, barely 16 years old, sent to face supernatural dangers that have defeated mature warriors. Every paternal instinct rebels against such a proposal, yet he cannot refuse one accomplishments place him beyond normal social obligations. The boy is still a youth, the king protests with desperate politeness. Perhaps in a few years, when his training reaches completion. The ascetic's eyes flash with the fire that once reduced armies to ashes when he wielded royal power. I do not ask for your permission, King. I state my requirement. The prince possesses qualities necessary for this mission, whether you recognize them or not. Dharma calls him to service that will prepare him for greater tasks ahead. The confrontation hangs in the air like thunder before lightning strikes. The monarch cannot refuse a legitimate request without violating principles upon which his entire reign rests. Yet sending his son into supernatural dangers seems like madness. The king's anguish fills the throne room with tension that makes courtiers hold their breath. Sage Vasishtha, the royal family's preceptor and the visitor's old rival, intervenes with wisdom born from centuries of experience. Your Majesty, this teacher does not make requests lightly. If he believes Prince Rama possesses the qualities needed for this mission, perhaps we should trust his judgment. The boy cannot remain in the palace forever if he hopes to fulfill his destiny. The prince himself settles the matter by stepping forward with palms joined in respectful greeting. I am ready to serve, revered teacher. My life belongs to Dharma, and if you believe I can advance righteousness through this service, I offer myself willingly. The youth's calm acceptance of dangerous duty astounds even experienced courtiers, while his father struggles between pride in his son's courage and terror at the risks involved. Yet the king cannot argue with the choice without undermining the very principles he has taught his children. If my brother goes, I accompany him, Lakshmana declares with fierce determination. We have never been separated, and I will not begin now. The teacher nods approvingly at this display of brotherly devotion. Both will serve the mission well. Prepare for immediate departure. Forces wait for no one's convenience. The leave-taking reveals the depth of family bonds that make the royal household more than mere political alliance. The king embraces his sons with trembling hands, offering blessings that carry paternal love, mixed with desperate hope for their safe return. The queens weep openly while pressing amulets and sacred threads upon boys who seem far too young for such dangerous missions. Kausalya's blessing carries special weight as the eldest son's mother and the kingdom's first queen. May Dharma protect you as you protect Dharma, my child. Remember that righteousness is your strongest armor and truth your sharpest weapon. Kaikeyi, despite her own son remaining safely in the palace, offers maternal affection to her stepson with tears that surprise even herself. Returns safely. Ayodhya needs its future king. Sumitra's blessing encompasses both her own son and his beloved brother. Lakshmana, your duty is to guard your brother as he guards righteousness. Let no force in the three worlds separate you from your sacred obligation. The brothers touch their parents' feet in final reverence before joining their guide for the journey that will transform them from sheltered royalty into seasoned warriors. As the teacher leads them through Ayodhya's gates toward the wilderness beyond, crowds line the streets to witness their departure with mixtures of pride and anxiety that reflect the entire kingdom's emotional state. Beyond the city's protective walls, the brothers enter a world far different from palace courtyards and royal gardens. Dense forests stretch toward horizons where mountains pierce clouds like spears, while rivers run wild between banks that have never known human manipulation. Here, nature reveals both its beauty and its dangers to travelers, brave enough to venture beyond civilization's comfortable boundaries. Their guide proves to be more than a mere teacher as the journey progresses. His knowledge encompasses not only religious mysteries, but also practical skills essential for wilderness survival. He teaches the boys to read signs in animal behavior, to find water sources hidden from ordinary eyes, to identify plants that heal and those that poison, and to move through hostile terrain without alerting predators both natural and supernatural. More importantly, the ascetic begins revealing weapons' existence the young men never suspected. These are not mere physical armaments, but forces condensed into forms that mortal warriors can wield, each one representing different aspects of power channeled through human agency. Astras, he explains, as they camp beside a sacred pool where lotus blooms glow with inner light, are gifts from the gods to those pure enough to receive them. Each weapon requires perfect discipline to invoke, absolute moral clarity to guide, and complete selflessness to employ without corruption. The teaching continues through days and nights as their guide imparts knowledge that transforms the boys' understanding of warfare itself. They learn that true strength comes not from muscle and bone, but from alignment with principles, that victory belongs not to the fierce, but to the righteous, and that the greatest battles are fought not against external enemies, but against internal weaknesses that corrupt the soul. The eldest absorbs these lessons with natural ease that amazes even their teacher, displaying intuitive understanding of concepts that normally require decades of study to master. His questions reveal depth of insight remarkable in one so young, while his practical application of weapons demonstrates perfect harmony between knowledge and action. Lakshmana, initially frustrated by mystical concepts that seem removed from straightforward combat, gradually discovers that discipline enhances rather than replaces physical prowess. His fierce loyalty to his brother provides the emotional foundation necessary for channeling energies, proving that devotion itself can become a form of achievement. Their destination approaches as the forest deepens around them, shadows growing longer and stranger as ordinary rules of nature yield to more primordial forces. Ancient trees tower overhead like pillars supporting the sky itself, their branches intertwining to create living cathedrals where sunlight filters through leaves in patterns that suggest sacred geometry. Here, in this realm where the physical and metaphysical worlds intersect, lurk the demons. Assaults on the teacher's ashram threaten more than mere human convenience. These are Rakshasa warriors, supernatural powers, and complete absence of moral restraint make them formidable opponents for even the most skilled mortal fighters. The ashram itself sits in a clearing that radiates peace despite the dangers surrounding it. Simple structures built from forest materials house sages. Practices maintain balance through sacrificial rituals performed with perfect precision. Their work seems humble compared to royal splendor, yet its importance dwarfs all worldly achievements by keeping the universe itself functioning properly. Here, their guide declares as they enter the sacred precincts, "You will learn whether palace training prepares you for real challenges. The demons come primarily at night, when darkness strengthens their power while weakening human perception. You must remain alert without becoming paranoid, aggressive without losing control, and deadly without sacrificing the purity that allows you to stand on consecrated ground. The first attack comes with sunset, when shadows stretch like grasping fingers across ground that daylight has kept safe. Tataka, a demoness' once beautiful form, has been twisted by malice into something nightmarish, leads her spawn in assault that tests every lesson the boys have learned. The eldest prince's response reveals the transformation that teaching has wrought in the young warrior. Moving with fluid grace that makes combat seem like dance, he invokes weapons with mantras that cause the very air to shimmer with power. His arrows, blessed with celestial force, strike their targets with precision that defies natural law, while his bearing remains calm as mountain lakes, even in the chaos of supernatural battle. Lakshmana fights with complementary fury, his devotion to his brother translated into devastating effectiveness against enemies who threaten his beloved sibling. Where the elder embodies controlled power, the younger represents righteous wrath that burns away evil through sheer intensity of purpose. Tataka falls to arrows after a battle that shakes the earth beneath their feet, her death scream echoing through dimensions beyond human perception. Her demonic offspring flee into shadows that swallow them like hungry mouths, leaving the ashram peaceful once more under stars that seem to shine more brightly in celebration of righteousness triumphant. But this victory proves only the beginning of trials that will test the young men's growing mastery. Subahu and Maricha, more powerful demons' abilities, exceed even Tataka's formidable strength. Launch coordinated assaults designed to overwhelm the ashram's defenders through strategies that combine brute force with diabolical cunning. The battles that follow stretch across multiple nights, each engagement teaching new lessons about the nature of evil and the requirements for defeating it. The elder brother learns to read supernatural auras that reveal demonic intentions, to anticipate attacks that follow no earthly logic, and to maintain purity even while dealing death to enemies who deserve no mercy. His growing reputation spreads beyond the ashram as news of his victories reaches neighboring kingdoms through networks of communication that connect all who serve righteousness. Ascetics in distant hermitages whisper of a prince power matches his physical prowess, while kings wonder whether this young warrior might be the answer to their own supernatural troubles. Lakshmana's development parallels his brother's, though following different paths suited to his unique temperament. His devotion becomes the foundation for achievements that surprise even himself. The final confrontation arrives when Maricha, eldest and most cunning of the demon warriors, abandons direct assault for psychological warfare, designed to corrupt the brothers through doubt and fear. His illusions create false scenarios where victory seems impossible and righteousness appears futile, testing not the young men's combat skills, but their faith in principles that guide their lives. The eldest prince's response to this ultimate trial reveals depths of character that justify their teacher's confidence in selecting him for this mission. Refusing to be deceived by appearances that contradict his understanding of truth, he maintains perfect clarity of purpose, while his actions demonstrate unwavering commitment to Dharma, regardless of apparent consequences. Maricha's defeat, accomplished through weapons that strike not at his physical form, but at the corruption that gives him power, marks the completion of the brothers' first real test as warriors of righteousness. The demon's destruction releases energies that purify the entire region, allowing ritual work to proceed without supernatural interference. "You have exceeded my expectations," the teacher tells his pupils, as dawn breaks over an ashram now permanently secured against demonic assault. "Your training here prepares you for greater challenges that await in the wider world. But first, you must witness an event that will complete your education in ways that combat never could." The ascetic's words prove prophetic as news arrives of a ceremony that will transform both young men's understanding of their place in the order of things. King Janaka of Mithila announces a Swayamvara for his daughter Sita, but this will be no ordinary bride-choosing ceremony where suitors compete through displays of wealth or conventional accomplishments. The princess will marry whoever can string the bow of Lord Shiva himself, a weapon so massive and powerful that armies of ordinary men cannot even lift it, much less bend its strength to human will. The challenge has attracted kings and warriors from across the known world, each convinced that his prowess will prove sufficient for a task that has defeated every previous attempt. Their teacher's smile suggests knowledge that transcends immediate circumstances as he prepares to escort his pupils toward this gathering of royal power. "Come," he tells them, "and witness how destiny arranges itself through events that seem like mere human drama." The journey to Mithila becomes a pilgrimage through lands where legend and reality intertwine like lovers' hands, where every hill and river carries stories of gods and heroes' deeds shaped the world itself. The brothers listen to these tales with growing understanding that their own lives are becoming part of narratives larger than individual ambition or personal desire. As they travel, their guide continues their education through stories that illuminate principles governing all existence. He speaks of Dharma's eternal struggle against adharma, of how forces incarnate in human form whenever balance tilts too far toward darkness, and of destiny's inexorable movement toward fulfillment, regardless of temporary obstacles. The teacher's words carry weight beyond their immediate meaning, preparing the young men for revelations that will transform their understanding of themselves and their purpose in creation itself. Yet he speaks carefully, revealing only what their current development allows them to comprehend without overwhelming minds still growing into their full potential. Mithila approaches like a jewel set in emerald fields, where prosperity reflects generations of righteous rule. King Janaka's reputation for wisdom and devotion has created a realm where achievement matters more than military conquest, where philosophers debate mysteries in courts normally reserved for political intrigue. The city itself radiates an atmosphere of anticipation as royalty from distant kingdoms converge upon a spectacle that promises to determine not merely one princess's marriage, but possibly the future balance of power throughout the subcontinent. Each arriving delegation displays wealth and might calculated to impress observers while intimidating potential rivals. Yet beneath this surface, pageantry flow undercurrents of significance that only the most perceptive observers can detect. Forces gather like storm clouds on horizons beyond normal perception, while destiny itself seems to hold its breath, awaiting developments that will echo through countless future generations. The stage is set for an encounter that will join two souls. Unity transcends ordinary marriage to become a partnership between righteousness incarnate and the feminine principle that sustains all creation. Everything that has preceded this moment, the sacred births, the training, the battles against supernatural evil, has been preparation for a meeting that will reshape not merely personal lives, but the fundamental nature of existence itself. The eldest prince approaches his destiny with the same calm acceptance that has characterized his response to every previous challenge. Unaware that he travels toward a woman, love will become both his greatest joy and his deepest trial. Behind him follows Lakshmana. Devotion will soon expand to encompass not merely his brother, but the partnership that marriage will create. The wheel of time turns toward its appointed hour, carrying all participants toward a moment when the plan will reveal itself through events that appear to be simple human choices, but represent the will of existence itself, working through mortal instruments. The kingdom in waiting has produced its heir. Now that heir must find his princess to complete the equation that will restore balance to a world increasingly threatened by the forces of darkness. The gods themselves lean forward from their celestial realms to observe developments that will determine whether light or shadow rules the age to come. In Mithila, before Shiva's mighty bow, the eternal story of good confronting evil prepares to enter its next crucial chapter. Mithila's great assembly hall stretches before the gathered royalty, like a vast arena built for gods rather than mortals. Ivory pillars carved with celestial dancers rise toward a ceiling, painted with constellations that mirror the actual heavens, while precious stones embedded in marble floors catch torchlight and scatter it in rainbow patterns across walls hung with silks from distant kingdoms. The air thrums with tension as princes and kings from across the subcontinent eye each other with barely concealed rivalry, each man convinced that destiny has summoned him to claim the most beautiful bride in the three worlds. At the hall's center rests the object that has drawn these ambitious suitors, Shiva's bow, massive beyond human comprehension. The weapon stretches longer than 10 men lying end to end, its dark metal surface inscribed with mantras that seem to shift and writhe in the flickering light. 8 wheels support its impossible weight, yet even with this mechanical assistance, previous attempts to move the bow have left grown warriors gasping and defeated. The very air around it seems to shimmer with barely contained power, as if the weapon strains against physical laws that can barely contain its essence. King Janaka sits upon his throne with the serene composure of a philosopher king who has transcended ordinary attachment to worldly outcomes. His daughter Sita stands beside him, her beauty so radiant that it seems to illuminate the entire hall despite her modest demeanor. She moves with grace that suggests divine heritage, her dark eyes holding depths that speak of wisdom far beyond her years. A garland of victory flowers rests in her hands, waiting for the man who can prove himself worthy through strength rather than mere boasting. One by one, the assembled suitors approach the legendary weapon with confidence that crumbles into humiliation. King Ravana of Lanka, whose 10 heads crown a frame of supernatural proportions, strides forward with arrogance that befits a ruler of demons. His massive hands close around the bow's grip with assurance born from countless military victories. Yet despite strength that has toppled mountains and diverted rivers, the weapon refuses to budge even a finger's width. Sweat beads on his multiple foreheads as he strains against resistance that mocks his legendary prowess. Indrajit, his son and heir, attempts to succeed where his father failed, employing techniques learned in battles against the gods themselves. The young prince's supernatural abilities have earned him victory in celestial conflicts. Yet Shiva's bow responds to his efforts with the same immobile disdain it showed his sire. Father and son retreat from the challenge with barely concealed fury, their pride wounded more grievously than any physical defeat could accomplish. Kumbhakarna, Ravana's brother and a warrior whose size dwarfs even the Lankan king's imposing frame, lumbers forward like a mobile mountain. His approach shakes the hall's foundations, and spectators hold their breath as hands large enough to grasp elephants close around the bow's massive grip. For a moment, watchers believe they detect the slightest tremor in the weapon's position, but the movement proves illusory. Even this giant among demons cannot overcome the force that keeps Shiva's weapon motionless. King after king follows in similar failure. Warriors whose names inspire terror across battlefields find themselves defeated by an inanimate object that seems to mock their greatest efforts. Some attempt cunning rather than brute force, seeking mechanical advantages or trying to invoke their own divine weapons to aid in the task. Others rely on teamwork, gathering their strongest retainers in coordinated efforts that prove no more successful than individual attempts. Through it all, the eldest prince of Ayodhya sits quietly beside his teacher, observing the proceedings with calm attention that neither anticipates triumph nor fears defeat. His presence in the hall has attracted considerable notice from those who recognize the young warrior's growing reputation. Yet he shows no inclination to join the parade of frustrated suitors. Lakshmana fidgets beside him, eager to see his beloved brother attempt the challenge, but the elder sibling's stillness suggests deeper currents than mere reluctance to compete. "Why do you hesitate?" Janaka finally asks, his voice carrying across the hall to reach the Ayodhya delegation. Surely the prince who defeated Tataka and her demons possesses strength sufficient for this trial. The question draws every eye in the assembly toward the young man who has remained so conspicuously aloof from the competition. Murmurs ripple through the crowd as courtiers speculate about whether humility or uncertainty keeps him seated, while so many others have embarrassed themselves through failure. Vishvamitra's slight nod provides the permission that protocol requires, though his expression suggests that outcome has never been in doubt. The prince rises with fluid grace and approaches the legendary weapon, his movements so natural and unforced that they seem more like a leisurely stroll than preparation for an impossible task. Standing before Shiva's bow, he pauses not from hesitation, but from reverence. His palms join in respectful salutation to the great god whose weapon awaits his touch, and his lips move in silent prayer that acknowledges both his own unworthiness and his willingness to serve righteousness regardless of personal consequences. The gesture transforms what might have been mere physical contest into something approaching religious ceremony. When his hands finally close around the bow's grip, watchers expect to see the same strain and struggle that has marked every previous attempt. Instead, the weapon responds to his touch, like a faithful horse recognizing its master's hand. What has remained immovable for countless suitors lifts easily in his grasp, rising from its supporting wheels, as if weight has suddenly become irrelevant. The hall falls silent as he draws the bowstring back with steady pressure that shows no hint of effort. The weapon bends to his will with increasing ease, until, at the moment of perfect tension, the ancient cord snaps with a sound like thunder that shakes the very foundations of Mithila. The great bow, freed from the stress that has held it intact for eons, splits cleanly in two halves that fall to the marble floor, with crashes that echo through dimensions beyond ordinary hearing. For several heartbeats, absolute silence grips the assembly, as minds struggle to process what eyes have witnessed. Then Sita steps forward with a smile that outshines the sun itself, approaching the man who has accomplished the impossible, with the same natural grace that marked his approach to the challenge. The victory garland settles around his neck like destiny fulfilling itself, and their eyes meet in recognition that transcends mere physical attraction to acknowledge souls prepared for each other across countless lifetimes. The wedding celebrations that follow transform Mithila into a realm of joy that seems to encompass the entire universe. Musicians play melodies that make listeners weep with happiness, while dancers perform with such grace that even the gods pause in their celestial activities to watch. Flowers rain from clear skies as if nature itself celebrates the union, and rivers run with water so pure that a single sip can heal decades of suffering. Dasharatha arrives with a procession that reflects Ayodhya's prosperity and power, bringing gifts that represent the finest achievements of human craftsmanship. The meeting between the two kings reveals immediate mutual respect, based on shared commitment to righteous rule. And their negotiations proceed with the smooth efficiency of like-minded rulers who understand that marriage alliances serve larger purposes than mere personal satisfaction. Yet even as wedding preparations reach their crescendo, the careful observer might detect subtle signs of the forces that will soon disrupt this perfect happiness. Among the demons who witness the bow-breaking, angry whispers speak of humiliation that demands revenge. Ravana's departure from Mithila carries undertones of wounded pride that will fester like poison until it erupts in violence. The seeds of future tragedy scatter even as present joy reaches its peak. The marriage ceremony itself unfolds with splendor that exceeds every previous royal wedding in recorded history. Sacred fires burn with flames that reach toward heaven, while priests chant mantras that resonate through multiple dimensions of existence. Sita and her new husband circle the ceremonial flames 7 times, each revolution binding them more closely in partnership that transcends ordinary human relationships to become a cosmic alliance between complementary aspects of divine truth. As the newlyweds complete their vows, thunder rolls across clear skies and flowers materialize from empty air to shower the assembled guests. The very elements seem to celebrate a union that restores balance to forces that govern the universe itself. What appears to mortal eyes as merely another royal marriage represents, to those with vision to perceive it, the reunification of powers that creation requires for its continued existence. The return journey to Ayodhya becomes a triumphal procession that stops at every major city along the route, as local rulers emerge to honor the prince who accomplished what seemed impossible. Word of the bow breaking has spread faster than the wedding party travels, creating a legend that grows with each telling until fact becomes indistinguishable from myth. In Ayodhya itself, preparations for the greatest celebration in the kingdom's history transform every street into a festival ground. Citizens compete to create the most elaborate decorations, while merchants distribute sweets and gifts with generosity that reflects the entire realm's joy. The air itself seems to sparkle with happiness, as a people long anxious about their dynasty's future now see their beloved prince returning with a bride whose beauty and virtue promise generations of worthy heirs. Dasharatha's reunion with his eldest son reveals the depth of paternal love that has made separation a constant source of worry despite pride in the young man's achievements. The king's embrace conveys months of suppressed anxiety, finally released in the certainty that his heir has not only survived supernatural dangers, but emerged stronger and more accomplished than ever. The presentation of Sita to her new family unfolds with ceremony that acknowledges both her royal status and her role as future queen of Ayodhya. Kausalya welcomes her daughter-in-law with tears of joy that speak of prayers finally answered, while Kaikeyi and Sumitra embrace the young woman who will help secure the dynasty's continuation. The three queens' unanimous approval of their new family member bodes well for household harmony that royal polygamy often threatens. Lakshmana's introduction to his brother's bride creates an immediate bond of mutual respect and affection that will prove crucial in trials ahead. His protective instincts, previously focused solely on his sibling, expand naturally to encompass the woman who has become an integral part of their unity. Sita's gracious acceptance of his devotion transforms what might have been awkward adjustment into seamless expansion of existing relationships. Bharata and Shatrughna, returned from extended visits to their maternal relatives, complete the family reunion with enthusiasm that reflects genuine affection rather than mere protocol. Their immediate acceptance of Sita demonstrates the emotional maturity that marks all four brothers, creating domestic harmony that supports the political stability essential for effective rule. The months that follow the wedding represent the golden peak of Ayodhya's prosperity and happiness. The royal family functions with unity that makes governance seem effortless, while the kingdom itself flourishes under leadership that combines wisdom with righteousness. Citizens speak of entering an age where human potential achieves its highest expression through perfect alignment between rulers and ruled. Trade flourishes as merchants from distant lands seek to establish relationships with a realm whose reputation for honest dealing attracts commercial partnerships that benefit all parties. Scholars arrive from across the known world to study in libraries and schools that make Ayodhya a center of learning rival to any celestial academy. Artists and craftsmen find patronage that allows their talents to flower in works that will inspire admiration for countless generations. Military strength grows not through aggressive expansion, but through the natural attraction that righteous power exercises over those who seek protection from oppression. Neighboring kingdoms request defensive alliances that transform potential enemies into willing allies, creating a network of mutual support that makes war increasingly unlikely throughout the entire region. The prince and his bride settle into married life, with happiness that seems too perfect to endure in a world where suffering remains the common lot of mortals. Their love deepens with each passing day as they discover that their union encompasses not merely physical attraction, but genuine meeting of minds and spirits that share identical commitments to duty and compassion. Sita's influence on palace life proves entirely beneficial, as her wisdom and kindness inspire improvements in everything, from administration of justice to care for the kingdom's poor and disabled. Her suggestion that royal women should participate more actively in governance initially raises eyebrows among traditional courtiers, but quickly proves its worth through practical results that benefit the entire realm. The couple's daily routine reflects their shared values through activities that balance personal happiness with public responsibility. Mornings often find them in private devotions that strengthen their spiritual foundation, while afternoons bring consultations with ministers and petitioners that demonstrate their commitment to accessible leadership. Evenings provide time for private conversation that deepens their understanding of each other's thoughts and dreams. Yet even in this period of unprecedented happiness, careful observers might detect signs of impending change. Dasharatha's advancing age becomes more apparent as the responsibilities of rule begin to weigh more heavily on shoulders that have carried them for decades. His increasing tendency to speak of retirement and succession suggests that major transitions approach, despite the kingdom's apparent stability. The question of inheritance, temporarily overshadowed by the joy of the prince's marriage, resurfaces in council discussions about the kingdom's future leadership. While no one doubts that the eldest son will eventually inherit his father's throne, the timing and manner of succession require careful planning to ensure smooth transition that maintains both domestic peace and international stability. Dasharatha's announcement, when it finally comes, surprises no one yet still creates excitement throughout the kingdom. Standing before his assembled court with dignity that reflects decades of successful rule, the aging monarch declares his intention to crown his eldest son as heir apparent, beginning a gradual transfer of power that will culminate in full abdication when preparation reaches completion. The time has come, he proclaims to cheering courtiers, to recognize formally what reality has long made apparent. My son has proven himself worthy of the crown through deeds that surpass even my own achievements. Let the kingdom prepare for a coronation that will secure our dynasty's future while honoring the virtues that have made Ayodhya great. The announcement triggers celebrations that rival those surrounding the royal wedding. Citizens pour into streets to express joy that has been building since the prince's triumphant return from Mithila. The prospect of rule by a leader who combines youth's vigor with mature wisdom creates optimism about the future that spreads far beyond Ayodhya's borders. Preparations for the coronation ceremony consume weeks, as artisans create regalia worthy of a king whose reputation already spans the known world. The crown itself, wrought from gold that has never known base touch, and embedded with gems that capture and reflect light like trapped stars, becomes a masterpiece that symbolizes the perfection expected from its wearer. Foreign dignitaries begin arriving to witness a ceremony that promises to mark the beginning of a new era in regional politics. Kings who once viewed Ayodhya as merely another competing power now recognize the emerging dominance of a realm ruled by wisdom rather than mere force. The guest list reads like a catalogue of everyone who matters in the contemporary world. In these weeks of preparation, one invitation travels to a distant palace, where its reception will determine the course of all subsequent events. Bharata and Shatrughna, visiting their maternal grandfather, King Ashwapati, in the far kingdom of Kakaya, receive word of their brother's approaching coronation, with joy tempered by disappointment that distance may prevent their attendance. Kaikeyi, who might have been expected to feel some jealousy at seeing her stepson elevated above her own child, instead expresses genuine happiness at news that vindicates her faith in the family's future. Her letter to Dasharatha congratulates him on a decision that serves both justice and practical wisdom, while assuring him of her complete support for the transition. Yet in the shadows of even this perfect happiness, forces gather that will test every virtue the royal family has cultivated. The maid Manthara, gnarled with age and twisted by years of nursing grievances against a world that has rewarded others more generously than herself, begins weaving the poison that will transform celebration into catastrophe. Her whispered words to Kaikeyi carry venom disguised as concern for the queen's welfare and her son's future. Day by day, conversation by conversation, she plants seeds of doubt about whether the proposed coronation truly serves Bharata's interests, or whether it represents betrayal of promises made in moments when royal gratitude sought expression through binding commitments. The corruption spreads slowly at first, like disease that attacks healthy tissue through almost imperceptible stages. Kaikeyi's natural affection for her stepson provides strong resistance to suggestions that his elevation threatens her own child's future. Her innate nobility rebels against schemes that would disrupt family harmony for the sake of political advantage. But Manthara possesses the cunning of one who has spent a lifetime observing human weakness and learning to exploit it. She reminds Kaikeyi of the battlefield incident years ago when the queen's courage saved her husband's life, and of the grateful king's promise to grant any two boons she might request. What seemed like romantic gestures at the time now appear as opportunities for securing her son's rightful inheritance. "You saved the king's life," the maid hisses with reptilian persistence. "Should that service earn less reward than stringing a bow and marrying a beautiful woman? Does heroism in battle deserve smaller recognition than success in games? Your son possesses every virtue that makes his half-brother praiseworthy, yet he will spend his life in subordination to one whose only advantage lies in the accident of birth order." The arguments continue night after night, wearing away resistance through constant repetition that gradually makes the unthinkable seem reasonable. Manthara's skill lies not in presenting novel ideas, but in taking natural concerns and nurturing them until they overwhelm judgment and compassion. Every mother worries about her child's future. The maid simply feeds those worries until they consume everything else. The transformation of Kaikeyi from loving stepmother to calculating rival unfolds so gradually that she herself remains unaware of how thoroughly her perspective has shifted. Each small step seems justifiable in isolation. Each argument appears to flow logically from the previous conclusion. Only when the process reaches completion does the full extent of her change become apparent to outside observers. The moment of crisis arrives on the very eve of the coronation, when all preparations have reached completion and the kingdom holds its breath in anticipation of witnessing history. Sita applies final touches to ceremonial garments that will mark her transformation from princess to queen, while her husband reviews the oaths and obligations that will soon bind him to service greater than personal desire. Through the palace, servants make last adjustments to decorations that have transformed every room into settings worthy of celestial celebration. Musicians rehearse fanfares that will announce each stage of the ceremony, while priests review rituals that connect earthly kingship to divine authority. The very air seems to vibrate with expectation as a kingdom prepares to crown its future. In this atmosphere of universal joy, Kaikeyi withdraws to the chamber of anger, a small, windowless room where queens traditionally retreat when their displeasure requires dramatic expression. Her appearance there, dressed in rough garments and lying upon the bare floor like a supplicant rather than a sovereign, signals crisis that brings the king rushing to her side with alarm that quickly transforms into bewilderment. "What troubles you, beloved?" Dasharatha asks with genuine concern that reflects decades of marital affection. "Today should bring you joy equal to my own. Your stepson's coronation honors our entire family and secures the prosperity you have helped create. Why do you greet triumph with sorrow?" Kaikeyi's response emerges with calculated precision that reveals the extent of her preparation for this confrontation. "I seek only what you yourself promised in the hour when my courage preserved your life. 2 boons you swore to grant whatever I might request, sworn by sacred oaths that bind kings more tightly than ordinary mortals. I have come to claim what honor and justice both demand." The reminder strikes Dasharatha like a physical blow as memory floods back to that battlefield moment when his young queen's quick thinking and quicker action had indeed saved him from an enemy spear. His grateful promise, made in the euphoria of survival and admiration for her heroism, had seemed like romantic gesture rather than binding commitment. Now, decades later, the debt comes due at the worst possible moment. "Name your desires," he replies, with growing dread that already anticipates the nature of her demands. "Whatever I can grant within the bounds of Dharma, I will provide gladly." Kaikeyi's smile carries no warmth as she speaks words that will shatter the kingdom's happiness, like glass struck by lightning. "First, I request that my son Bharata be crowned king instead of his half-brother. Second, I demand that Rama be exiled to the forest for 14 years, forbidden to enter any civilized settlement or maintain contact with his family and friends." The requests hit Dasharatha with force that leaves him gasping for breath, as if struck in the chest by a war elephant. His mind reels as he struggles to comprehend how the woman he has loved and trusted could make demands that would destroy everything he has worked to create. The betrayal cuts deeper than mere political maneuvering to strike at the very foundations of family trust and marital love. "You cannot mean this," he whispers, with desperate hope that this represents some kind of jest or test rather than serious intention. "These demands would destroy our son's life, our family's unity, and our kingdom's stability. I beg you to reconsider before words spoken in anger create consequences that cannot be undone." But Kaikeyi's resolve proves as immovable as Shiva's bow had been before the right hand touched it. Manthara's poison has done its work too thoroughly to be neutralized by appeals to affection or duty. "I mean every word, and I will accept no substitutes or delays. Grant my boons as you swore to do, or face the universe's judgment for an oath-breaking king who places personal preference above sacred commitment." The demand creates an impossible dilemma that no amount of wisdom can resolve satisfactorily. Refusing to honor his sworn word would violate the fundamental principle that makes royal promises binding and trustworthy. Yet granting Kaikeyi's requests would inflict terrible injustice on an innocent son, while potentially destroying the kingdom that oath-keeping is meant to protect. Through the night, Dasharatha pleads with his wife to reconsider demands that seem designed to cause maximum suffering to everyone involved. He offers wealth, territory, honors for her son, anything that might satisfy whatever grievance drives her to such extremes. But each alternative receives the same cold rejection that makes clear that only the specific punishments she has requested will satisfy her transformed heart. As dawn approaches, bringing with it the hour appointed for coronation that must now become catastrophe. The broken king summons his eldest son to receive news that will test every virtue that training and character have instilled. The young man arrives in ceremonial dress, prepared for the greatest day of his life, only to find his father weeping like a man whose world has ended. The revelation of Kaikeyi's demands strikes the prince with the same devastating force that had shattered his father's composure. Yet his response reveals the depth of his spiritual development. After the initial shock passes, his face settles into lines of calm acceptance that suggest surrender to forces beyond human control, rather than rebellion against unfair fate. If this is what Dharma requires, he says, with voice that remains steady despite the magnitude of what he faces, then I accept exile gladly. Your honor matters more than my comfort, and the kingdom's well-being exceeds my personal desires. Let no one say that Ayodhya's future king placed selfish ambition above sacred obligation. His ready acceptance of catastrophic personal loss astounds even his father, who had expected protests, arguments, or at least requests for time to prepare for such drastic change. Instead, the young man, who could have claimed the throne by force or popular support, chooses instead to honor principles that make his sacrifice necessary. Word of the dramatic reversal spreads through the palace like wildfire, creating chaos among servants and courtiers who struggle to comprehend how celebration could transform into tragedy so quickly. The coronation preparations that had reached completion overnight become bitter reminders of hopes destroyed by political calculation disguised as moral principle. Sita's response to news that will separate her from her husband creates the day's second great test of character and commitment. Custom would allow her to remain in comfort, while her spouse endures exile, maintaining her position and security until his eventual return. Instead, she insists on sharing his hardships with determination that will not be swayed by arguments about the forest's dangers or appeals to consider her own welfare. Where my husband goes, I follow, she declares with quiet firmness that makes discussion pointless. Exile shared becomes pilgrimage, while comfort enjoyed alone becomes prison. My place is beside him whatever circumstances we must face together. Lakshmana's decision to accompany his brother surprises no one who understands the depth of their bond, yet his willingness to abandon royal comfort for forest hardships still moves observers to tears of admiration. His declaration of loyalty comes with fierce emotion that contrasts sharply with his brother's calm acceptance, but springs from equally noble motivations. I have never been separated from my brother, and will not begin now, he announces with voice that dares anyone to suggest alternatives. If he goes to the forest, I go as well. If he faces dangers, I share them. If he suffers, I suffer beside him. This is not duty, but privilege, the chance to prove that devotion means more than mere words. The preparations for departure unfold with heartbreaking swiftness, as luxury gives way to necessity and comfort yields to survival. Royal garments become simple forest clothes, while jewels and ornaments transform into basic tools and supplies. The transformation seems to mock the elaborate preparations that had been made for ceremony, now cancelled forever. Kausalya's farewell to her son reveals maternal love that transcends personal pain to find strength in pride for his character. Her blessing carries the weight of generations of royal mothers who have sent their children into danger for the sake of principles larger than family happiness. Go with my blessing, my noble son, she whispers through tears that speak of heartbreak tempered by admiration. Show the world what righteousness looks like when tested by the greatest trials. Return to us not merely as king, but as living proof that virtue can survive any challenge. Sumitra's farewell to Lakshmana combines maternal concern with understanding that her son's choice represents the highest expression of fraternal love. Her blessing acknowledges both the pain of separation and the pride of seeing her child choose loyalty over comfort. "Protect your brother as he protects Dharma," she tells him, with voice that maintains composure despite the magnitude of separation. "Let your service become an example for all who seek to understand what brotherhood truly means." Even Kaikeyi, watching the preparations from her chamber, experiences moments of doubt as she sees the full human cost of her political victory. The sight of Sita preparing for exile, of Lakshmana choosing hardship over comfort, of her stepson accepting injustice with grace, all combine to create guilt that wars with satisfaction at achieving her goals. Yet Manthara's influence proves too strong for second thoughts to overcome completely. Each time conscience threatens to reassert control, the maid reminds her mistress of everything at stake for her own son's future. The poison, once administered, continues working, regardless of subsequent regrets or moral qualms. The final departure scene unfolds with drama that will be remembered as long as stories of honor and sacrifice continue to inspire human hearts. Three figures in simple forest garb walk through Ayodhya's gates toward exile that represents triumph of principle over power, duty over desire, spiritual victory over material defeat. Behind them, they leave a kingdom in shock, a family divided, and a people struggling to understand how their greatest day of celebration became their darkest hour of loss. Yet they also leave an example of nobility that will inspire countless generations to choose righteousness over convenience, honor over advantage, sacrifice over selfishness. The forest awaits them with dangers they cannot imagine, and trials that will test every virtue they possess. But they walk toward their destiny with steps that do not falter, carrying within themselves the strength that comes from perfect alignment between conscience and action, between principle and practice. Their exile begins not with defeat, but with victory. Victory over the temptation to compromise virtue for comfort, to choose the easy path over the righteous one, to preserve personal happiness at the cost of dharmic duty. In leaving behind everything they have known and loved, they carry with them something more precious than any earthly treasure, the certainty that they have chosen correctly when choice itself seemed impossible. The great renunciation has begun. Beyond Ayodhya's protective walls, the three exiles enter a realm where nature reigns supreme and human authority holds no sway. Ancient trees tower overhead like cathedral spires, their interwoven branches creating a living roof that filters sunlight into dancing patterns of gold and shadow. Rivers run wild between moss-covered stones, while flowers unknown to palace gardens perfume the air with fragrances that seem to carry whispers of forgotten magic. The Dandaka wilderness stretches endlessly before them, a vast expanse of untamed beauty that has remained unchanged since the world's creation. Here, ascetics pursue enlightenment in hermitages carved from living rock, while dangerous creatures roam paths that few mortals dare to travel. This sanctuary exists outside normal time, where seasons flow differently and ordinary rules bend to accommodate forces older than human memory. Their first nights beneath star-scattered skies teach lessons that no palace education could provide. Sleeping on beds of woven grass, drinking from streams whose purity surpasses any royal cup, eating fruits gathered from trees that offer their bounty freely. Each experience strips away another layer of attachment to material comfort. What begins as hardship gradually transforms into liberation from desires that had seemed essential but proved surprisingly dispensable. Janaka's daughter adapts to these changes with grace that amazes even her devoted husband. The woman who once wore silks now moves through thorny undergrowth in simple bark cloth, her beauty enhanced rather than diminished by simplicity. Her laughter rings through clearings where deer emerge from hiding to listen, while her gentle presence seems to calm even the wildest creatures they encounter. The younger brother creates their daily shelter with skills learned during military campaigns, weaving branches and leaves into structures that provide protection from rain and wind. His fierce devotion to his sibling extends naturally to include the woman who has become an integral part of their unity. Each evening finds him creating a protective perimeter around their rest site, vigilant against dangers both natural and supernatural. Kausalya's eldest son assumes responsibility for their spiritual welfare, leading morning prayers that connect their wandering existence to eternal principles. His archery provides game when fruit and roots prove insufficient, yet he never takes life unnecessarily or without proper thanksgiving to the creatures who sustain them. Each arrow flies with precision that reflects both physical skill and moral clarity. Months pass in this nomadic existence as they journey deeper into wilderness that grows increasingly wild and wonderful. They encounter hermitages where aged sages welcome them with hospitality that makes royal palaces seem crude by comparison. These holy men live in perfect contentment, despite possessing nothing beyond basic necessities, their faces radiant with peace that no earthly pleasure could provide. At Bharadwaja's ashram beside the sacred Ganges, they receive instruction in survival techniques specifically suited to their unusual circumstances. The venerable teacher explains which plants offer nourishment and which bring death, how to read weather signs written in cloud formations, and where to find water during the dry season when rivers disappear underground. Your banishment serves purposes beyond punishment, the sage tells them as they prepare to continue their journey. These years will forge qualities that palace life could never develop. Hardship shared becomes strength multiplied, while isolation from worldly distractions allows inner wisdom to flourish. His prophecy proves accurate as their journey continues toward even wilder territories. Each challenge they face together, river crossings during flood season, encounters with territorial wild elephants, navigation through maze-like canyons, strengthens bonds between them while building confidence in their ability to survive whatever trials await. The transition from wandering to settlement occurs when they discover a location that seems designed by nature itself for human habitation. A crystal-clear stream provides fresh water year-round, while fertile soil supports abundant vegetation. Tall trees offer both shade and building materials, and natural rock formations create defensible positions against potential threats. Here, at Panchavati, they construct their first permanent dwelling since leaving Ayodhya. Using techniques learned from various hermits encountered along their path, they build a substantial hut that combines comfort with practicality. Gardens planted around their home yield vegetables and herbs, while fruit trees provide sustenance that varies with the seasons. Their domestic routine achieves the kind of harmony that makes simple life seem infinitely preferable to royal complexity. Dawn brings prayers and bathing in the sacred stream, followed by gathering food and maintaining their homestead. Afternoons often include long walks through surrounding wilderness, discovering new species of plants and animals, while deepening their appreciation for creation's infinite variety. Evenings provide time for storytelling and philosophical discussion that enriches their understanding of dharmic principles. The princess's questions often reveal insights that surprise her male companions, while her perspective on ethical dilemmas frequently illuminates aspects they might otherwise overlook. Her presence transforms their wandering into something approaching an extended spiritual retreat. Yet even in this idyllic setting, reminders of the larger world's corruption occasionally intrude upon their peaceful existence. The wilderness harbors creatures of darkness alongside its beauty, and some of these beings view the presence of righteous humans as an affront to their dominion over territory they consider exclusively their own. The first such encounter arrives in the form of Surpanaka, a demoness whose shape-shifting abilities allow her to appear as a beautiful woman seeking shelter and companionship. Her true nature reveals itself through eyes that hold malice despite her seductive smile, and through aura of corruption that sensitive observers can detect beneath surface attractiveness. She approaches their hut at midday, when the sun's position creates deceptive shadows that aid her disguise. Her voice carries honeyed sweetness as she addresses the elder brother, with words calculated to inflame masculine pride and desire. "Noble warrior, your beauty surpasses that of any man I have encountered in centuries of wandering. Surely you would benefit from companionship more exciting than this mortal woman who shares your humble dwelling." The response reveals character development that wandering has strengthened rather than weakened. Instead of anger at her disrespectful reference to his beloved wife, he replies with gentle humor that deflects insult while avoiding unnecessarily harsh rejection. "Beautiful lady, I am bound by marriage vows that prevent me from accepting your generous offer. Perhaps my unmarried brother might better appreciate your company." This diplomatic deflection might have ended the encounter peacefully if Surpanaka possessed any capacity for accepting graceful rejection. Instead, her rage at being refused transforms her beautiful disguise into something nightmarish. Her true form emerges with claws like daggers, fangs dripping venom, and skin that writhes with supernatural corruption. "If you will not come willingly," she snarls, with voice that makes nearby animals flee in terror, "then I shall remove the obstacle that prevents your acceptance of my love." Her attack targets the young wife with supernatural speed that would overwhelm any ordinary woman, intending to eliminate the rival whose existence blocks her desires. Sumitra's son responds with protective fury that devotion can unleash when those he loves face mortal danger. His sword moves faster than thought, severing the demoness's nose and ears with surgical precision that leaves her alive but permanently disfigured. The mutilation serves multiple purposes: immediate protection for his brother's bride, punishment fitting the crime of attempted murder, and warning to other supernatural beings who might contemplate similar assaults. Surpanaka's screams of pain and rage echo through the wilderness as she flees toward territories where her demonic relatives maintain strongholds built for warfare against human settlements. Her cries for vengeance carry promises of retribution that will involve forces far more dangerous than a single shape-shifting seductress. The brothers understand immediately that their peaceful interlude at Panchavati has ended. Disfiguring a demon of Surpanaka's lineage guarantees retaliation from her kinsman, and such creatures never forgive injuries to their pride or person. The attack they have repelled represents merely the opening gambit in a conflict that will test their abilities against supernatural opponents whose power exceeds anything they have previously faced. They do not wait long for confirmation of their fears. Within days, the sound of approaching armies reaches their hermitage as Kara and Dushana, Surpanaka's brothers and commanders of vast demonic hosts, arrive with 14,000 Rakshasa warriors thirsting for revenge. The demonic horde moves through the wilderness like a plague of locusts, destroying everything in its path while seeking the humans who dared harm their sister. The approaching battle represents a test unlike any the brothers have faced since their training under Vishvamitra years ago. Then they fought individual demons in protected ashrams with their teacher's guidance readily available. Now they must defend themselves and their companion against overwhelming numbers while relying entirely on their own skills and judgment. Strategic planning proceeds with careful consideration of their advantages and disadvantages. The cleared area around their hut provides fields of fire for archery, while preventing enemies from approaching under cover. Natural rock formations offer defensive positions that force attackers into predictable patterns. Most importantly, the righteous nature of their cause provides access to divine weapons that mere skill alone could never employ effectively. When Kara's host finally emerges from the tree line, their appearance staggers even prepared observers. Demons in every conceivable shape pour across the clearing, like a nightmare tide of claws, fangs, and supernatural malevolence. Some tower above the trees, while others scuttle across the ground like enormous insects. All share the common characteristics of inexhaustible hunger for destruction and complete absence of any restraining moral principle. The battle that follows will be remembered as long as stories of good triumphing over evil continue to inspire human hearts. Standing alone before this supernatural army, the eldest exile invokes divine weapons with mantras that make the very air shimmer with celestial power. His arrows multiply in flight, each shaft becoming dozens that strike their targets with precision that defies natural law. The Agneya Astra burns through demonic ranks like wildfire consuming dry wood, while the Vayu weapon creates whirlwinds that lift enemies into the sky before dashing them against rocky outcroppings. Each divine weapon demonstrates different aspects of cosmic power, channeled through human agency, proving that righteousness aligned with proper knowledge can overcome any numerical disadvantage. His brother guards the perimeter with sword work that combines deadly efficiency with perfect timing. His blade moves in patterns too complex for ordinary eyes to follow, yet every cut serves precise tactical purposes. Where the elder employs divine weapons against massed formations, he provides personal combat skills that prevent individual enemies from breaking through their defensive line. The supernatural warriors discover that facing righteous opponents differs dramatically from their usual prey of helpless victims. These humans fight with inner fire that burns away fear and doubt, leaving only crystal clear purpose that makes every action devastatingly effective. More importantly, their cause provides access to forces that demonic corruption cannot touch or comprehend. Kara himself, a warrior whose personal power rivals that of minor gods, challenges the elder brother to single combat that will determine the battle's outcome. His confidence rests on centuries of victory against celestial armies, experience that makes him consider these mortal opponents merely another conquest in his long career of successful warfare. The duel reveals how completely righteousness can triumph over mere physical power when properly directed. Where Kara relies on brute strength and supernatural abilities, his opponent employs perfect technique combined with moral authority that transforms every arrow into an instrument of cosmic justice. The demon's attacks, however fierce, cannot penetrate defenses that spring from complete alignment with universal principles. Kara's death comes swiftly once his opponent stops testing his abilities and commits fully to ending the threat. The Brahmastra, most powerful of all divine weapons, strikes the demon commander with force that annihilates not merely his physical form, but the spiritual corruption that animated it. His destruction creates a shockwave of purifying energy that sweeps across the battlefield, causing his surviving warriors to flee in panic. The aftermath of victory reveals both the triumph of Dharma and the cost of defending it. 14,000 supernatural enemies lie dead across the clearing that had been their peaceful home, while the survivors carry news of defeat to territories where even more dangerous beings plot revenge against the humans who have proven so unexpectedly formidable. Dushana's death during the same battle eliminates another major threat, but also ensures that word of these defeats will reach the highest levels of demonic hierarchy. The brothers' growing reputation as demon slayers attracts attention from beings whose power dwarfs that of the enemies they have already faced. Fame brings safety in some contexts, but when dealing with creatures motivated by pride and malice, reputation often increases rather than reduces danger. The seasons turn as life at Panchavati gradually returns to peaceful routine, despite awareness that their respite may prove temporary. They repair damage from the battle while improving their defenses against future attacks. Gardens replanted after being trampled during combat grow more abundantly than before, as if the earth itself has been purified by righteous blood spilled in its defense. The princess's role during these dangerous months reveals depths of courage that complement her gentleness. While never directly participating in combat, she provides support that makes the difference between mere survival and complete victory. Her presence gives her defenders reasons to fight that transcend personal safety, while her unwavering faith in their eventual triumph strengthens their resolve during moments when odds seem overwhelming. The news of these victories travels through networks that connect all beings who serve either righteousness or its opposite. In hermitages throughout the wilderness, ascetics offer prayers of thanksgiving for warriors who protect their sacred work from supernatural interference. In demonic strongholds, however, the same news triggers planning for revenge that will require resources and cunning far beyond anything employed in previous attacks. The greatest of these strongholds lies far to the south, on an island where golden palaces rise above azure seas in settings that would seem paradisiacal, if not for the corruption that taints everything they contain. Here rules Ravana, 10-headed king of the Rakshasas, whose power exceeds that of many gods, and whose pride has grown to proportions that threaten the cosmic order itself. Word of his sister's mutilation and his cousin's deaths reaches this island fortress through messengers who tremble as they deliver news that will surely provoke terrible retribution. The Demon King's rage, when it finally erupts, shakes the very foundations of his palace, while his roars of fury carry across dimensions to disturb the meditations of sages throughout the three worlds. Yet beneath his anger lies calculation that makes him far more dangerous than any merely emotional response could achieve. The Lankan ruler's intelligence rivals his strength, and both have been sharpened through eons of successful conquest against opponents who underestimated either his cunning or his power. These humans who have defeated his relatives represent a challenge that requires careful planning rather than straightforward assault. The solution that eventually emerges from his brooding combines personal revenge with strategic advantage in ways that demonstrate why he has achieved dominion over supernatural realms that lesser beings find uncontrollable. If these warriors prove too formidable for direct attack, perhaps they can be neutralized through targeting what they value most highly. Every strength becomes weakness when properly exploited, and even the most righteous opponents possess vulnerabilities that cunning can discover and malice can exploit. The plan that takes shape in his devious mind requires assistance from an old ally, whose specialized skills make him perfect for missions, requiring both supernatural ability and complete moral flexibility. Maricha, the shape-shifting demon who barely survived his encounter with the young warrior years ago at Vishvamitra's ashram, owes his current existence to flight rather than courage. This debt, combined with fear of what refusal might bring, makes him an ideal tool for implementing schemes too subtle for direct force. The conspiracy that develops between these ancient enemies of righteousness relies on exploiting the very virtues that make their intended victims so formidable. Courage that rushes to aid the helpless, loyalty that places family welfare above personal safety, love that makes rational judgment difficult, all become weapons in the hands of those who understand how goodness can be turned against itself. As the rainy season approaches Panchavati, bringing with it atmospheric changes that seem to reflect gathering supernatural storms, the three wanderers continue their peaceful existence unaware that forces beyond their imagination are converging upon their sanctuary. Their daily routines proceed with the rhythmic certainty of those who have found harmony between human needs and natural cycles, while dangers approach that will test every bond that holds their small family together. The final phase of their undisturbed happiness unfolds with poignant beauty that gains intensity from its fragility. Morning prayers beside the sacred stream, afternoon walks through familiar paths where every tree and flower has become a friend, evening conversations that explore questions of duty and destiny, all continue with the precious quality that comes from sensing that cherished experiences may soon become memories. The young wife's contentment during these last peaceful weeks reflects complete fulfillment in a life that others might consider hardship or deprivation. Surrounded by the love of her husband and his devoted brother, living in harmony with nature's rhythms, freed from the artificial complexities that make palace existence simultaneously luxurious and constraining. She has found happiness more complete than any earthly pleasure could provide. The trap, when it finally springs, will exploit precisely this happiness by threatening to destroy it through the very virtues that have created it. But for now, in these final days of innocence, their love remains unshaken, and their faith in Dharma's ultimate victory burns bright as the sacred fires that warm their simple home against the advancing darkness. The greatest trial of their wandering approaches, though they greet each dawn with gratitude for gifts that banishment has unexpectedly provided. Soon, the testing that has shaped them through gradual challenges will give way to an ordeal that tears them apart before it can bring them back together. The foundation of strength they have built through months of shared hardship will face stresses that threaten to crack even the strongest bonds. Yet even as catastrophe approaches, the peace of Panchavati continues undisturbed, like the calm that precedes tempests whose fury will reshape everything they touch. In this calm, three souls who have found perfect harmony prepare unknowingly for separation that will test whether love forged in wandering can survive the ultimate trial of faith. The wilderness holds its breath, waiting. The morning arrives crisp and golden at Panchavati, bearing no hint of the catastrophe that will transform this day into legend. Dawn prayers echo across the sacred stream as the three exiles maintain routines that have brought them such profound contentment. The eldest brother tends their small garden, while his wife gathers flowers for their daily offerings. Sumitra's son sharpens weapons with the methodical care of one who understands that vigilance preserves peace. Their tranquil domesticity masks the supernatural drama unfolding beyond their awareness. Far to the south, Maricha reluctantly assumes the form that will seal their fate, a golden deer of such extraordinary beauty that its appearance seems to capture liquid sunlight in living flesh. Every movement creates ripples of radiance across its hide, while jeweled antlers catch morning light and scatter it in rainbow fragments that dance through the air. The shapeshifter approaches their sanctuary with steps that make no sound, his supernatural grace allowing him to materialize at the clearing's edge like a vision conjured from paradise itself. His transformed appearance represents artistry, born from desperate cunning, every detail calculated to inflame desires that virtue normally restrains. The deer's eyes hold depths that suggest intelligence beyond animal nature, while its movements combine wildness with an almost human awareness of its own magnificent beauty. Janaka's daughter discovers this apparition during her morning walk, and her gasp of wonder carries clearly to where her husband tends their vegetable plots. "Come quickly," she calls with excitement that contains no shadow of suspicion. Such a creature as this surely exists nowhere else in all creation. The sight that greets him defies rational explanation. No earthly deer possesses such radiance. No natural creature moves with such deliberate grace. No wild animal displays ornaments that rival the finest jewelry crafted by celestial artisans. Yet the being before them breathes and moves with apparent life, its eyes reflecting intelligence that suggests awareness of the effect its presence creates. Surely this must be Maya's own deer, his wife whispers, with awe that makes her voice tremble. See how it watches us, as if it understands our words and wishes to communicate something beyond ordinary speech. Its hide seems woven from sunbeams themselves, while those antlers could crown the king of all forest creatures. Her fascination proves infectious, despite warning instincts that whisper of supernatural deception. The deer's beauty transcends normal experience to enter realms where logic bends before wonder, where caution dissolves in the face of marvels that seem to promise insights into creation's deepest mysteries. Even the most disciplined mind struggles to maintain skepticism when confronted with loveliness that appears to validate every legend of divine intervention in mortal affairs. "I must possess this creature," she declares with longing that surprises even herself. Imagine how its presence would illuminate our simple home, how its companionship would remind us daily of the miraculous forces that govern existence beyond human understanding. Surely fate itself has brought this treasure within our reach. Her husband's initial reluctance crumbles before arguments that appeal to both love and dharmic duty. How can he deny his beloved wife such joy when their wandering has stripped away so many other pleasures? Moreover, if this creature represents some divine test or blessing, refusing to act might constitute rejection of gifts that heaven offers through mysterious channels. "I shall capture it alive," he promises, though unease prickles along his spine like warning fingers. Such beauty deserves preservation rather than destruction, and your happiness matters more than any personal misgivings I might harbor about supernatural appearances in natural settings. Sumitra's son voices the skepticism that warrior instincts demand. "Brother, nothing about this creature follows natural patterns. Its appearance here and now seems too convenient, too perfectly designed to appeal to our desires. Perhaps we should observe longer before acting on assumptions that may prove dangerously false." But passion has already overcome prudence, and arguments for caution sound increasingly feeble against the evidence of their own eyes. The deer's continued presence, its apparent docility, its almost playful responses to their attention, all combine to make supernatural explanations seem like excessive suspicion rather than reasonable precaution. "Guard our home and its precious occupant," the eldest brother instructs as he strings his bow and checks his quiver. This pursuit should require little time or effort, given the creature's apparent tameness and the limited terrain available for escape. "I shall return before the sun reaches its zenith, with either our golden prize or certain knowledge that it was never meant for mortal possession. The hunt begins with confidence that quickly transforms into frustration, as the quarry displays cunning that far exceeds normal animal intelligence. Each arrow that should find its mark somehow misses by the narrowest margins, while the deer's flight leads ever deeper into territory unfamiliar even to these experienced woodsmen. Its path seems random yet purposeful, evasive yet somehow encouraging, as if it wishes to be caught but only after exhausting its pursuer's patience and energy. Hours pass in this maddening pursuit as the hunter finds himself drawn ever farther from home by a creature that maintains exactly the right distance to inspire continued effort without allowing success. His archery, normally unerring, fails repeatedly against a target that seems to anticipate each shot and adjust its position just enough to avoid harm, while remaining tantalizingly within range. The trap's psychological sophistication becomes apparent only in retrospect. Each near miss reinforces determination to succeed, while the deer's apparent vulnerability makes abandoning the chase seem like cowardice rather than wisdom. The creature's beauty serves as constant reminder of what waits to be won, while its elusive behavior transforms simple desire into obsessive need for conquest that overrides all other considerations. Meanwhile, at their abandoned sanctuary, Sumitra's son maintains vigilant watch, despite growing anxiety about his brother's prolonged absence. The morning hours stretch toward noon, without any sign of the returning hunter, creating unease that no rational argument can completely dispel. His protective instincts, finely tuned by months of wilderness survival, detect disturbances in the natural rhythm that typically characterizes their peaceful home. The princess shares his concern while struggling against fears that seem disproportionate to the actual situation. Her husband has often pursued game through the surrounding territory, sometimes remaining away for most of a day, when tracking proved particularly challenging. Yet something about this hunt feels different, charged with significance that transcends ordinary food-gathering expeditions, or even unusual hunting opportunities. Perhaps I should follow his trail, the younger brother suggests, as shadows begin shifting toward their midday positions. Two hunters working together might succeed where one alone has apparently failed, and at minimum I could ensure that no harm has befallen him in unfamiliar territory. But protocol demands that someone remain to guard their dwelling and its irreplaceable occupant. The princess cannot defend herself against serious supernatural threats, while their home contains supplies and equipment essential for survival that raiders might steal or destroy. Abandoning either responsibility would violate duties that supersede personal anxiety about delayed returns from hunting expeditions. The dilemma resolves itself when distant cries echo through the woodland, carrying tones of desperation that chill listeners' hearts despite distortion by intervening vegetation. The voice, unmistakably familiar, despite distance and distress, calls for immediate assistance with urgency that suggests mortal peril rather than mere inconvenience. "Help me, brother." The distant plea carries clearly through air that seems to focus sound for maximum emotional impact. I am trapped and wounded, perhaps dying. Come quickly before enemies who have found me complete their deadly work. The appeal strikes the younger warrior like a physical blow, activating every protective instinct that has defined his relationship with the elder sibling since childhood. Without conscious thought, he begins gathering weapons and equipment necessary for rescue operations, his mind already calculating routes and strategies for reaching his brother's position quickly enough to provide meaningful assistance. "You cannot leave me alone," the princess protests with fear that makes her voice shake. These calls may represent deception designed to separate us when enemies require our isolation for successful attack. Remember how Maricha escaped your brother's arrows years ago through shape-shifting abilities that could easily duplicate familiar voices. Her arguments carry logical force that should prevent hasty action, yet the emotional pressure of hearing his beloved brother's apparent death cries overwhelms rational analysis. Even if the situation involves supernatural deception, abandoning someone who might genuinely need help violates every principle that has guided their family relationships throughout their lives. I must go, he declares, while drawing his sword and testing its edge against his thumb. If these calls represent genuine distress, delay might cost his life. If they constitute trickery, my presence there might disrupt whatever schemes require his continued absence from your side. Understanding that arguments will not dissuade him from what duty appears to demand, she extracts promises that provide minimal comfort against dangers that logic suggests but cannot precisely define. Draw the protective boundary that your brother taught you, and warn me against crossing it, regardless of what appearances might suggest. Perhaps such barriers will prove sufficient if this day indeed brings supernatural challenges designed to test our unity. Sumitra's son responds by invoking the Lakshman Rekha, a mystical perimeter that draws its power from spiritual discipline, combined with protective mantras learned during their training under Vishvamitra. His sword traces intricate patterns around their dwelling, while sacred syllables charge the air with energies that will resist penetration by beings whose intentions conflict with dharmic principles. This boundary will hold against any force motivated by evil, he promises, while completing the ritual that transforms ordinary space into consecrated ground. Remain within its protection, regardless of what inducements might tempt you to venture beyond its safety. No matter what forms approach or what voices call, trust nothing that requires you to cross this line until my return with definitive proof of our circumstances. His departure leaves the princess alone for the first time since their marriage, surrounded by protective energies that provide security at the cost of complete isolation from external contact. The silence that follows his vanishing into woodland depths carries weight that makes even familiar surroundings seem strange and potentially threatening. Every bird call might signal approaching danger, while each rustling leaf could herald enemies whose supernatural abilities make conventional defenses useless. The hours that follow test nerves already strained by her husband's prolonged absence and his brother's desperate departure. Noon passes into afternoon, while shadows lengthen toward evening. Yet neither warrior returns, with explanations that might ease fears growing stronger with each minute of continued solitude. The protective boundary that should provide comfort instead begins feeling like a prison that separates her from knowledge of their fate. Into this charged atmosphere of anxiety and isolation comes the figure that represents the culmination of supernatural scheming and demonic patience. Ravana approaches in the guise of a wandering ascetic, his 10 heads concealed by illusion that presents only one face, radiating benevolent wisdom and spiritual achievement. His saffron robes, sacred thread, and ritual markings create an appearance of sanctity that would deceive even experienced observers under normal circumstances. Blessed daughter, he calls with voice that carries harmonics of centuries spent mastering sacred chants. I am a humble sage, seeking shelter and sustenance as I travel between hermitages where my spiritual duties await completion. Surely such a virtuous household as this will not deny basic hospitality to one whose only possessions are knowledge and devotion. The request places Janaka's daughter in an impossible position that reveals the diabolical sophistication of the trap's design. Refusing hospitality to genuine ascetics violates fundamental dharmic obligations, yet crossing the protective boundary to provide such hospitality might expose her to dangers that the mystical perimeter was specifically created to prevent. Every option involves potential violation of sacred duties that make moral choice difficult even under ideal circumstances. "Revered sir," she replies with respect that acknowledges his apparent spiritual status while maintaining safe distance, "my husband and his brother have temporarily departed on urgent business, leaving me under strict instructions to remain within protective barriers they have established. Perhaps you could accept whatever offerings I can provide, without requiring me to violate the boundaries that their wisdom has deemed necessary for my safety." Her attempt at compromise reveals both courtesy and caution, yet Ravana's response demonstrates why he has achieved dominion over realms that resist lesser forms of cunning. "Child, your concern for obedience honors the training that has shaped your character. Yet surely your teachers also instructed you in duties owed to spiritual guests whose needs supersede personal convenience or domestic arrangements. How can offerings made from safe distance provide proper hospitality to one whose very presence brings blessings upon generous households?" The argument appeals to religious training that has indeed emphasized hospitality as among the highest virtues, particularly regarding holy men whose spiritual achievements earn them special consideration from devout householders. The ascetic's apparent learning, demonstrated through scriptural quotations and philosophical observations, reinforces his credibility while making refusal seem like selfishness disguised as prudence. Moreover, he continues with logic that seems irrefutable. What protection could mere boundaries provide against forces that genuinely threaten righteous souls? If you face real danger, only dharmic action can provide true safety, while excessive caution often creates the very problems it seeks to avoid. Each word strikes like a hammer against resistance already weakened by isolation, uncertainty, and training that has indeed emphasized religious obligations above personal security. The stranger's evident knowledge of sacred traditions, combined with his benevolent demeanor and reasonable arguments, gradually erodes barriers that supernatural appearance and miraculous abilities might never overcome through direct assault. The fatal step, when it finally comes, seems like natural extension of virtuous impulses rather than dangerous abandonment of protective wisdom. Crossing the mystical boundary to offer proper hospitality to an apparent sage feels like moral necessity rather than reckless disregard for warnings that suddenly seem based on excessive suspicion rather than reasonable caution. The moment her foot touches ground beyond the protective perimeter, Ravana's disguise dissolves like morning mist before blazing sunshine. 10 heads emerge from single neck, while massive frame expands to proportions that dwarf surrounding trees. Golden ornaments appear across dark skin that radiates power too intense for mortal eyes to bear comfortably, while expressions of triumph and malice replace the benevolent wisdom that had masked his true nature. "At last," he roars with voices that shake the earth beneath their feet, while echoing across dimensions beyond normal perception. "The prize that will complete my revenge, and demonstrate that even the most righteous mortals cannot escape consequences when they dare oppose Ravana's will." Her screams of terror and desperate calls for help carry through wilderness that no longer contains protectors capable of responding to such summons. The golden deer had led her husband far beyond hearing range, while false cries of distress had drawn his brother into similar isolation. The trap's timing ensures that rescue becomes impossible, even if her captors encounter delays that might otherwise provide opportunities for intervention. Ravana's aerial chariot, the Pushpaka Vimana, descends from clouds where it had waited like a hovering bird of prey for the signal that its services were required. Crafted by celestial architects and powered by cosmic forces, the vehicle responds to its master's will with speed that makes earthly transportation seem motionless by comparison. Within moments, abductor and victim soar southward toward distant Lanka, leaving behind only scattered evidence of the supernatural violence that has shattered their peaceful sanctuary. The return of the hunters to their devastated home unfolds with tragic irony that transforms what should have been triumph into the deepest despair. The golden deer, mortally wounded by arrows that finally found their mark, reveals its true demonic nature as death dissolves Maricha's shape-shifting abilities. His final words, gasped through lips that struggle against approaching dissolution, confirm what growing dread had already whispered. "Help me, brother," spoken in perfect mimicry of the voice that had drawn Sumitra's son away from his protective duties. The eldest exile's rush back to Panchavati becomes a race against fears that seem too terrible to articulate, yet too persistent to ignore. Every step toward home carries growing certainty that the day's strange events have somehow culminated in catastrophe that will transform their lives beyond recognition. The abandoned protective boundary, its mystical energies dispersed by the crossing it was meant to prevent, provides final confirmation that supernatural enemies have achieved objectives that planning and patience have made possible. Evidence of struggle scattered across ground that had known only peace tells a story that needs no interpretation by minds already prepared for the worst possible discoveries. Torn fabric from beloved garments, trampled flowers from carefully tended gardens, marks in the earth that suggest aerial departure toward horizons beyond immediate pursuit, all combine to create a picture of loss so devastating that acceptance seems impossible despite overwhelming proof. "She is gone," Sumitra's son whispers, with voice that can barely force words past the constriction in his throat. "Our carelessness has delivered the most precious thing in our world into hands that will show her no mercy and grant us no peace until we either rescue or die, attempting to do so." The grief that follows defies description by minds that have never experienced such complete devastation of hope and happiness. Two men who have faced supernatural armies without flinching now find themselves broken by the loss of one woman whose love has been the foundation upon which their contentment rested. Their wails of anguish echo through wilderness that seems to share their pain, while their tears water ground that has been consecrated by the footsteps of perfect innocence. Yet beneath this overwhelming sorrow flows determination that will not accept defeat, regardless of odds or obstacles that must be overcome to achieve reunion with their stolen treasure. The search that begins at Panchavati will carry them across continents and oceans, through dangers that make previous trials seem like mere preparation for challenges that will test every quality they possess. The trail leads southward through territories increasingly wild and strange, where ordinary rules yield to forces that predate human civilization. Following signs that only desperate love could detect, a broken twig here, a displaced stone there, fragments of clothing caught on thorns that line the aerial path their quarry has taken. They press deeper into lands where mortals venture at their peril. Days merge into weeks as the pursuit carries them through realms where geography itself seems fluid and unpredictable. Mountains rise where none existed the previous day, while rivers change course without apparent cause. The very landscape appears to shift according to supernatural whims that make navigation a constant challenge requiring intuition more than conventional wayfinding skills. Their first major clue comes from the dying Jatayu, king of eagles, and son of Aruna, charioteer of the sun itself. They find the great bird mortally wounded beside a rocky outcrop where his attempt to rescue their beloved princess had ended in noble failure against overwhelming supernatural force. His massive wings, once capable of soaring among clouds where lesser creatures cannot survive, now spread broken across stones stained with celestial blood. I fought, he gasps through a beak that struggles to form words despite approaching death. She called for help, an honor-demanded response regardless of personal cost. But Ravana's power exceeds even mine, and his aerial chariot moved faster than these old wings could match. Yet I marked his passage toward the southern seas, toward the island fortress where golden palaces rise above waters that hide horrors better left undisturbed. His death removes the last witness to their beloved's fate, while providing direction for continuation of pursuit that might otherwise have wandered aimlessly through territories too vast for systematic search. The king of birds' sacrifice inspires determination that transcends mere personal attachment to encompass larger questions of cosmic justice and the ultimate triumph of righteousness over evil. The journey southward continues through landscapes that grow increasingly exotic as they approach territories where normal rules hold progressively less sway. Here, they encounter peoples and creatures whose existence seems drawn from legends rather than natural history. Tribes of shapeshifters who change form according to emotional states. Talking animals whose wisdom exceeds that of many humans. Plants that respond to travelers' intentions, with either helpful guidance or dangerous misdirection. At Kishkinda, capital of the Vanara kingdom, their desperate search encounters allies whose assistance will prove essential for accomplishing objectives that mere human effort could never achieve. The monkey people who rule these mountainous territories possess qualities that make them ideal companions for missions, requiring both supernatural abilities and unwavering loyalty to righteous causes. Yet even here, their quest becomes entangled in local politics that must be resolved before assistance becomes available. The Vanara realm suffers under civil conflict between two brothers whose competing claims to rightful rule have divided the kingdom and weakened its capacity for unified action against external threats. Sugriva, the rightful king, driven into hiding by his stronger brother's usurpation, explains their desperate circumstances while pleading for assistance that only proven warriors could provide. Help me reclaim my throne from Vali's tyranny, and every resource at our disposal shall serve your mission to recover your stolen princess. Our combined strength might achieve what neither could accomplish independently. The proposal offers alliance that serves mutual interests while requiring intervention in conflicts that might distract from their primary objective. Yet the Vanara's knowledge of southern territories, their ability to travel vast distances quickly, and their supernatural strength make their assistance potentially decisive in any attempt to challenge Ravana's island fortress. The confrontation with Vali unfolds with violence that demonstrates both the Vanara brothers' incredible power and the moral complexity that often characterizes fraternal conflicts. The usurper's strength appears sufficient to defeat any challenger in direct combat, yet his rule rests on foundations that violate traditional law and natural justice. Only through strategy that exploits specific weaknesses can righteousness triumph over mere physical dominance. The eldest exile's intervention tips the balance through archery that strikes from concealment, ensuring Sugriva's victory while raising questions about the ethical implications of attacking opponents who have issued no direct challenge. Yet necessity sometimes requires actions that would be questionable under normal circumstances, and desperate times often demand extraordinary measures from those who serve causes greater than personal honor. Vali's death speech reveals nobility that makes his defeat seem tragic, despite the justice that demanded his overthrow. I understand now why fate has arranged my death at your hands rather than my brother's. Your mission serves cosmic purposes that transcend our local disputes, and my removal eliminates obstacles that might otherwise prevent success. Rule wisely, Sugriva, and serve these allies whose cause honors all who support righteousness against its enemies. The installation of Sugriva as rightful king provides the stable foundation necessary for organizing the vast search operation that their mission requires. The Vanara kingdom's resources, now unified under legitimate leadership, mobilize with efficiency that demonstrates why these monkey people have achieved dominion over territories that might otherwise resist organized control. Yet even with royal support, the task of locating one woman, held captive somewhere in the vast southern regions, appears almost impossible. The search parties that fan out across multiple directions face challenges that would discourage any but the most determined seekers, endless territories to explore, hostile creatures to overcome, and the constant possibility that their quarry has been moved to locations beyond their ability to reach or discover. The breakthrough comes through Hanuman, son of the wind god Vayu, and the most capable of all Vanara warriors. His unique combination of supernatural powers, unwavering devotion, and strategic intelligence makes him ideally suited for missions that would defeat ordinary heroes regardless of their courage or skill. More importantly, his commitment to dharmic principles ensures that his abilities will serve righteous purposes rather than personal ambition. Standing at the southern shore of the subcontinent, gazing across waters that stretch beyond the horizon toward destinations that exist in legend more than geography, this remarkable being prepares for the most famous leap in all recorded history. His target lies hundreds of miles across ocean, patrolled by creatures whose hostility toward unauthorized travelers has made the journey effectively impossible for anyone lacking his particular gifts. I shall find her, he declares, with confidence that transforms the impossible into the inevitable. Whether she lives in golden palaces or suffers in dungeon cells, whether she retains hope or has fallen into despair, whether rescue remains possible or requires miracles that only divine intervention can provide, I shall bring back knowledge that allows us to plan whatever action her situation demands. His expansion to mountainous proportions demonstrates power that few beings in creation possess, while his leap across the surging waters below reveals capabilities that justify the confidence his words express. Like a living missile powered by divine energy, he soars toward distant Lanka, while followers on the beach strain their eyes to track his progress across distances that soon render even his massive form invisible against the southern sky. The search for their stolen princess enters its most crucial phase, as her greatest hope for rescue disappears beyond the horizon, carrying with him the prayers and desperate wishes of all who love her. Behind him, two brothers settle down to wait for news that will determine whether their beloved will return to arms that have ached for her embrace, or whether they must prepare for war against enemies whose power has thus far proven irresistible. The wind carries him southward toward destiny, across the churning waters that separate the known world from legend itself. Hanuman soars with divine power coursing through his expanding form. The ocean below stretches endless and hostile, its depths harboring creatures that have devoured countless travelers, bold enough to attempt this impossible crossing. Yet the wind god's son moves through air, with confidence born from absolute faith in his mission's righteousness and his own supernatural capabilities. The journey tests even his remarkable abilities, as distance proves greater than any earthly measurement could encompass. Hours pass in steady flight over waves that seem to extend beyond the horizon's normal boundaries, while fatigue gradually accumulates despite reserves of strength that would sustain ordinary beings for months of continuous effort. The very air grows thicker and more resistant as he approaches territories where different laws govern natural phenomena. Hostile guardians emerge from the depths to challenge his passage, their massive forms breaking the surface in explosions of spray that create temporary islands of malevolent intent. Surasa, the serpent goddess whose mouth can expand to swallow mountains, rises before him with jaws that yawn wide enough to engulf his entire form. Her challenge follows ancient protocols that govern access to forbidden territories. None may pass without first submitting to my hunger. His response demonstrates both physical prowess and tactical intelligence that make him uniquely suited for missions requiring more than mere strength. Rather than engaging in futile combat against an opponent whose size can adjust to match any challenge, he employs cunning that exploits the very rules she has invoked, expanding to gigantic proportions that force her mouth to stretch beyond its limits, then instantly contracting to minuscule size that allows him to dart through her throat and emerge from her ear before she can adjust to his sudden transformation. Clever hero, she acknowledges with respect that transforms threat into blessing. Your wisdom honors the mission you serve, and your courage justifies the faith that others have placed in your abilities. Pass freely toward your destination, carrying with you my blessings for success in whatever trials await your arrival. Similar challenges follow as the crossing continues, each one designed to test different aspects of his character and capabilities. Simika, the shadow Caesar who feeds on darkness cast by flying creatures, attempts to drag him down through supernatural means that would defeat conventional resistance. His solution involves speed that outruns even the motion of shadows, combined with maneuvers that confuse targeting systems dependent on predictable flight patterns. These encounters serve purposes beyond mere obstacle creation, preparing him psychologically for the even greater challenges that await on the island fortress itself. Each victory builds confidence while demonstrating that supernatural opponents can be defeated through combinations of strength, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to righteous goals. More importantly, these tests prove that the powers protecting Lanka are not invincible, despite their formidable reputations. The first glimpse of his destination emerges from morning mist, like a vision conjured from the most extravagant dreams of celestial architects. Golden spires rise above emerald forests, while crystal palaces catch sunlight and scatter it in rainbow patterns, across waters that shimmer with unnatural perfection. The island's beauty surpasses anything found in mortal realms, yet careful observation reveals undertones of corruption that taint even the most magnificent structures. Lanka's fortifications reflect the paranoia of a ruler who has accumulated too many enemies through eons of conquest and oppression. Walls of living stone patrol themselves along the shoreline, while towers equipped with weapons beyond human comprehension sweep the approaches with energies that would instantly destroy unauthorized visitors. The very air above the fortress thrums with protective enchantments that create layers of security deeper than any physical barrier could provide. Penetrating these barriers requires abilities that few beings in creation possess, combined with planning that accounts for surveillance systems operating according to principles unknown to conventional military science. The wind god's son employs stealth that makes him invisible to normal observation, while moving through gaps in the mystical barriers that only detailed study could reveal. His reconnaissance skills, honed through years of intelligence gathering for the Vanara kingdom, allow him to map defensive patterns without triggering alarms that would summon overwhelming retaliation. The city within these fortifications exceeds every legend of demonic splendor, while simultaneously revealing the spiritual emptiness that underlies all purely material achievement. Streets paved with precious stones carry inhabitants whose physical beauty masks moral corruption so complete that their very presence pollutes the air around them. Gardens filled with otherworldly flowers emit fragrances designed to inflame desires that wisdom would restrain, while fountains flowing with celestial nectar intoxicate visitors with pleasures that ultimately destroy rather than fulfill. The demon lord's palace dominates this magnificence like a cancer at the heart of apparent paradise. Its 10 towers, one for each of the king's heads, rise above surrounding structures with architectural audacity that seems designed to challenge heaven itself. Each spire contains chambers devoted to different aspects of sensual and intellectual pleasure, creating a vertical city whose every level offers temptations calculated to corrupt even the most disciplined visitors. The search for Janaka's daughter within this labyrinth of luxury and vice demands patience that wars against urgency created by awareness of her suffering. Every chamber might contain the object of his quest, yet investigation must proceed with caution that prevents discovery by guards whose vigilance represents the only force standing between the princess and rescue that could transform despair into triumph. Hours of careful exploration through corridors that seem to rearrange themselves according to supernatural whims finally lead to the Ashoka Grove, a garden where trees weep tears of grief, while their branches droop with sorrow that seems to emanate from the earth itself. Here, among flowers that refuse to bloom and streams that flow backward in defiance of natural law, he discovers the treasure whose recovery justifies every risk and hardship of his impossible journey. She sits beneath the largest tree like a meditation on perfect suffering, her beauty undimmed despite months of captivity among beings who recognize no restraint beyond fear of their master's displeasure. Her simple garments, torn and stained by harsh treatment, cannot diminish radiance that springs from inner virtue rather than external adornment. More importantly, her posture suggests unbroken spirit, despite circumstances that would drive lesser souls to madness or despair. The Rakshasi guards who surround her combine preternatural vigilance with casual cruelty that makes their duty simultaneously effective and personally satisfying. Their constant threats and taunts reveal the Lankan king's strategy for breaking resistance through psychological torture that wears away hope more efficiently than any physical torment could achieve. Yet their victims' responses demonstrate nobility that their corruption cannot comprehend or successfully attack. "Accept our master's offer," the chief guard urges, with voice that carries false sympathy over undertones of barely restrained violence. "Your husband has surely forgotten you by now, probably taking comfort with other women while you suffer needlessly for loyalty to one who cannot even locate your prison. Why endure continued hardship for sake of someone who may not survive whatever dangers he faces in his hopeless quest?" Her reply cuts through their arguments with clarity that exposes the spiritual poverty underlying their apparent sophistication. "Even if death claims my body, my spirit remains bound to one whose virtue makes him worthy of any sacrifice. Your master's power may imprison my flesh, but cannot touch the love that connects souls across any distance. Threaten what you will, I shall never accept union with one whose very existence pollutes creation itself." Hidden in branches above this scene of perfect courage confronting absolute evil, Hanuman faces choices that will determine whether his mission achieves its intended goals, or merely provides information about circumstances beyond alteration. Direct rescue appears impossible, given the guard's supernatural abilities and the fortress's impregnable defenses. Yet revealing his presence might provide the psychological support necessary to sustain her resistance until external rescue becomes possible. His decision to make contact reflects understanding that hope shared doubles in strength, while despair, endured alone, compounds into unbearable weight. Timing his approach for the moment when guards briefly withdraw to report to their superiors, he descends from concealment to deliver the message that transforms captivity from nightmare into bearable trial, whose end remains visible despite apparently impossible obstacles. "Princess," he whispers, with voice pitched to carry no further than her ears, "your husband lives and searches for you with devotion that neither distance nor danger can weaken. I come as his messenger and the representative of allies, whose combined strength will soon challenge these walls that seem impregnable, only because their weaknesses remain unexplored." Her reaction combines disbelief with desperate hope, as she struggles to determine whether this apparent rescue represents reality or merely another torture designed to raise expectations that will be cruelly disappointed. "Who are you, and how did you penetrate defenses that have kept me isolated from all contact with the world beyond these cursed walls?" His explanation of his identity and mission provides authentication that no impostor could fabricate, while details about her husband's current circumstances offer proof that only genuine contact with the outside world could supply. More importantly, the ring he carries, her husband's personal seal, given specifically for this purpose, provides physical evidence that confirms what her heart yearns to believe, despite what her mind insists remains impossible. "This token proves my words and demonstrates that love transcends any barriers that malice can construct," he declares, while placing the precious circlet in hands that tremble with emotions too powerful for easy expression. "Your rescue approaches with the inevitability of sunrise, though the darkness before dawn may yet test your endurance beyond anything you have previously experienced." The brief contact serves purposes beyond mere message delivery, allowing assessment of her physical condition and mental state that will inform rescue planning when external forces finally gather sufficient strength to challenge Lanka's defenses. Her health, though strained by months of harsh treatment and psychological pressure, remains adequate for the rigorous escape that any successful rescue will necessarily require. More importantly, her spirit shows no signs of the corruption that prolonged exposure to demonic influence often produces in even the strongest souls. Their conversation continues only long enough to exchange essential information before approaching footsteps signal the guard's return from their supervisory consultations. His departure requires acrobatic skills that carry him beyond detection, while leaving no evidence of the contact that has transformed captivity from hopeless imprisonment into temporary separation, whose end can now be anticipated with confidence rather than mere wishful thinking. The exploration of Lanka's fortifications that follows provides intelligence essential for planning the assault that will soon test every advantage that righteousness possesses against barriers designed to resist even celestial armies. His reconnaissance reveals both the fortress's formidable strengths and the subtle weaknesses that clever strategy might exploit when sufficient force becomes available to test theories through practical application. The return journey across hostile waters proceeds with urgency, born from knowledge that time works against the captive princess, despite her remarkable courage and spiritual strength. Each day of continued imprisonment increases the psychological pressure, while providing additional opportunities for her captors to devise new torments designed to break resistance that conventional threats have failed to weaken. Yet the crossing also offers opportunities for actions that will support the coming assault through preliminary operations designed to weaken enemy morale, while strengthening the psychological foundation necessary for challenging opponents whose reputation alone has discouraged most potential adversaries. The fires that soon bloom across Lanka's outskirts serve both practical and symbolic purposes, demonstrating that the fortress's apparent invulnerability can be breached while providing evidence that rescue approaches with capabilities that match its determination. His arrival at the assembly point, where anxious allies await news, transforms despair into renewed determination, as reports of the princess's survival and precise location provide the intelligence necessary for planning operations that previously seemed impossible due to lack of reliable information. The ring returned as proof of contact becomes a talisman that inspires confidence, while his detailed descriptions of defensive arrangements allow strategic planning to proceed with precision rather than mere hopeful speculation. She lives and remains unbroken, he announces to listeners, whose relief transforms immediately into determination that the rescue, so tantalizingly close, must now be achieved, regardless of obstacles that continue to appear formidable despite intelligence that reveals their potential vulnerabilities. Lanka's fortifications, though mighty, contain flaws that united effort can exploit if courage matches planning and determination sustains action despite initial setbacks that may discourage weaker spirits. The construction of the bridge that will carry the Allied army across waters previously impassable to terrestrial forces becomes an epic engineering project that demonstrates how supernatural abilities directed toward righteous goals can accomplish objectives that conventional methods could never achieve. Under the direction of Nala and Nila, Vanara architects whose skills rival those of celestial builders, mountains literally move to create foundations, while forests donate their substance to construct spans that defy every principle of normal engineering. The work proceeds with urgency that acknowledges both the strategic importance of maintaining momentum and the personal anguish of leaders whose beloved remains captive among enemies, whose patience may soon exhaust itself in violence against the innocent. Each stone placed and timber positioned brings rescue closer, while providing constructive outlet for energies that might otherwise dissipate in destructive impatience at delays that careful planning necessarily imposes. The bridge's completion transforms the strategic situation by eliminating the geographical isolation that has previously made Lanka effectively invulnerable to terrestrial assault. For the first time in eons, the Demon Kingdom faces invasion by forces whose passage cannot be prevented by controlling sea routes that normally provide absolute security against conventional military operations. The army that crosses this miraculous span represents alliance between species normally separated by profound differences in nature and culture. Vanaras, whose supernatural strength allows them to hurl boulders like pebbles, march alongside bears, whose size and ferocity make them living siege engines capable of breaking fortifications through sheer physical impact. Humans provide leadership and strategic direction, while their non-human allies contribute capabilities that no conventional force could duplicate. The siege of Lanka that follows will be remembered as long as stories of good triumphing over evil continue to inspire courage in hearts tempted by despair when confronting overwhelming odds. The assault begins with preliminary operations designed to test defensive responses while probing for weaknesses that full-scale attack might exploit, despite the fortress's reputation for invincibility against external threats. Ravana's response reveals both supreme confidence in his defensive capabilities and growing concern about enemies whose very presence on his island demonstrates abilities that his previous experience suggested no terrestrial force possessed. His initial sorties probe Allied strength while attempting to discredit their unity through psychological warfare designed to exploit natural tensions between such diverse coalition partners. The battles that follow escalate through stages that test every virtue the Allied forces possess, while revealing the depths of corruption that motivate their opponents. Individual combat between champions provides opportunities for heroes to prove their worth, while larger engagements demonstrate the strategic advantages that righteousness possesses when properly organized and effectively directed toward appropriate objectives. Lakshmana's confrontation with Indrajit, Ravana's son and heir, whose magical abilities have earned him victory in battles against celestial armies, represents the personal stakes that give larger conflicts their emotional resonance. The young prince's apparent death, when struck by serpent arrows filled with venom, creates crisis that tests family bonds, while demonstrating the sacrifices that victory may require from those who serve, causes greater than personal survival. The healing that the wind god's son achieves through his midnight flight to distant Himalayan peaks where the Sanjivani herb grows becomes legendary proof that devotion, combined with divine ability, can overcome obstacles that would defeat any lesser combination of motivation and capability. His return with the entire mountain, rather than mere medicinal plants, demonstrates both the urgency that drives him and the margins of safety that such critical missions require. The war's climax approaches as conventional forces exhaust their effectiveness against barriers designed to resist any assault that depends primarily on normal military capabilities. The involvement of cosmic weapons transforms battle into conflict between principles that govern existence itself, with each divine astra representing different aspects of universal power, channeled through human agency toward decisive resolution of fundamental questions about the nature of righteousness and its ultimate triumph over evil. The Demon King's final stand reveals both the magnificent courage that has made him master of otherworldly realms and the spiritual blindness that makes his defeat inevitable, despite advantages that should guarantee victory under ordinary circumstances. His 10 heads provide mystical awareness, while his 20 arms wield weapons capable of destroying armies. Yet these physical advantages cannot compensate for moral weaknesses that undermine effectiveness despite overwhelming material superiority. The duel between the Demon King and the eldest prince transcends mere personal combat to become symbolic confrontation between cosmic forces whose conflict determines the fundamental character of the age. Each arrow fired and weapon invoked represents not merely tactical choice, but philosophical statement about the nature of power and its proper employment in service of principles that transcend individual ambition or personal preference. The Brahmastra's final deployment demonstrates why this ultimate weapon remains restricted to those whose moral purity provides both authorization for its use and protection against its devastating effects on anyone whose spiritual preparation proves inadequate for channeling such absolute force. The arrow that finally pierces Ravana's seemingly invulnerable form carries power that originates beyond the physical realm to strike at spiritual corruption that animates his seemingly immortal body. The Demon King's death creates shockwaves that ripple through dimensions beyond normal perception, as forces that have dominated the southern regions for eons suddenly find themselves without the leadership that has held their unnatural alliance together. His final words reveal nobility that makes his downfall seem tragic, despite the justice that demanded his overthrow, and the relief that his defeat brings to countless victims of his tyrannical rule. I die, knowing that my conqueror possesses virtues that justify victory more completely than my own power ever justified dominion. He gasps through lips that struggle against approaching dissolution. Let it be recorded that Ravana fell not to superior force, but to righteousness that could not be corrupted, despite every temptation that wealth and power could devise. The liberation of Lanka proceeds with merciful efficiency that demonstrates how victory guided by dharmic principles differs from mere conquest, motivated by personal ambition or national aggrandizement. The civilian population receives protection rather than punishment, while captured military forces face justice tempered by understanding that individuals often serve evil masters through coercion rather than genuine choice. Vibhishana's coronation as Lanka's new ruler provides both practical resolution to questions of post-war governance and symbolic demonstration that even demonic societies contain individuals capable of recognizing truth. When circumstances finally allow conscience to overcome fear or personal interest. His previous defection to the Allied cause during the siege had provided crucial intelligence while establishing precedent for moral choice that transcends tribal loyalty when larger principles demand such difficult decisions. The reunion between the rescued princess and her devoted husband unfolds with joy so complete that observers weep with happiness while participating vicariously in love's triumph over every obstacle that malice and circumstance had placed in its path. Yet even this perfect moment carries shadows that hint at trials still ahead. For societies often prove more difficult to convince than individuals when questions of virtue and honor enter realms where public opinion holds sway over private conviction. The Agni Pariksha that follows represents tragedy born from social pressures that force even the most virtuous individuals to submit to testing that should be unnecessary when truth remains obvious to anyone with eyes to see and hearts to understand. The fire trial through which the princess must walk to prove her purity during captivity reveals both the persistence of ignorance despite overwhelming evidence and the cruel irony that makes victims of oppression bear additional burdens to satisfy doubts that should never have been entertained. Her emergence from flames, unharmed by fires that would consume anyone whose virtue contained even the smallest flaw, provides vindication that silences critics while demonstrating divine support for innocence that needs no earthly proof to establish its reality. Yet the necessity for such proof creates wounds that may never fully heal, despite the triumph that makes reunion possible, and the future that stretches ahead with promise of happiness restored. The war ends with victory, complete but costly, purchased through sacrifices that remind victors of prices that righteousness sometimes demands from those who serve, causes greater than personal comfort or safety. The dead receive honor, while the living face responsibilities for rebuilding what conflict has destroyed and creating something better from ruins that war has left in its wake. Lanka stands conquered but not destroyed, its beauty preserved while its governance passes to rulers who understand that power exists to serve justice rather than merely to satisfy those who wield it. The bridge that carried invasion forces toward victory becomes symbol of connections that transcend natural barriers when necessity demands cooperation between beings normally separated by profound differences in nature and circumstance. The homeward journey approaches with anticipation, tempered by awareness that return to familiar places may require adjustments that exile and war have made necessary through changes that cannot be undone despite victory's achievement and suffering's end. The wheel of Dharma continues turning toward destinations that remain hidden, despite distance traveled and obstacles overcome through unity that has proven stronger than any force arrayed against it. Behind them, the sun sets over Lanka's golden spires, while ahead, the path leads toward Ayodhya and reunion with family whose patient waiting has finally reached its destined conclusion. The greatest war ever fought between the forces of good and evil has ended with light's triumph, though shadows linger as reminders that vigilance remains the price of freedom, and that righteousness requires constant renewal to maintain its victory against corruption that never fully accepts defeat. The epic's end approaches as heroes who have proven themselves worthy of legend prepare for the final chapter of their extraordinary journey. The Pushpaka Vimana rises from Lanka's golden shores like a floating palace reclaimed from celestial realms, its crystalline surfaces catching morning light and scattering it in patterns that seem to celebrate victory over darkness itself. The aerial chariot, once symbol of the demon king's arrogance, now serves righteousness as it carries the victorious heroes northward toward destinations that have lived in memory and dream throughout their years of wandering and warfare. From their elevated vantage point, the landscape below unfolds like an illuminated manuscript telling the story of their epic journey in reverse. The bridge, stretching across azure waters, appears as a golden thread, connecting worlds that were never meant to remain separated, while the battlefields where cosmic forces clashed now show signs of nature's healing touch as new growth emerges from soil enriched by the blood of heroes and demons alike. The princess sits beside her husband with contentment that transcends mere relief at captivity's end, her eyes reflecting peace that comes from trials survived, and love proven stronger than any force arrayed against it. The fire trial's vindication has restored her public honor, while their private bond has emerged from testing, purified like gold, refined in furnaces that burn away all impurities. Yet shadows linger in her gaze, hints of deeper wounds that time alone can heal. Beside them, Sumitra's devoted son maintains the vigilant watch that has defined his existence since childhood, though his attention now includes protective concern for the woman who has become integral to their unity. His wounds from the great battle remain tender, but his spirit soars with joy at the reunion that makes all suffering seem worthwhile. The Vanara allies who accompany them chatter excitedly about the wonders they observe, their simple pleasure in flight adding lightness to a journey that might otherwise carry too much weight of recent trauma. The wind, God's son, pilots their craft with skill that makes navigation seem effortless, despite the mystical forces required to keep such massive structures aloft across distances that would challenge even divine vehicles. His contentment radiates from successful completion of the mission that has established his reputation throughout the three worlds, yet his greatest satisfaction comes from seeing the family reunion that his devotion has helped achieve. As they travel, the eldest prince shares observations about the territories below that reveal how deeply his understanding of kingship has evolved through years of exile and warfare. Every village, every field, every river crossing suggests policies that could improve the lives of subjects he will soon govern. His perspective now encompasses not merely administrative efficiency, but the profound connections between righteous leadership and the prosperity of all who depend upon wise governance. See how the drought has affected these eastern districts, he points out, as they pass over regions where withered crops tell stories of hardship that palace dwellers rarely witness directly. When we establish our administration, irrigation projects must receive priority equal to military preparedness. A king who cannot feed his people possesses no legitimacy, regardless of his ancestry or personal virtues. Such observations reveal wisdom earned through intimate contact with suffering that theoretical education could never provide. The years spent living simply among ascetics and common folk have taught lessons about the true sources of contentment and the artificial nature of many desires that palace life presents as necessities. This knowledge will inform policies that serve genuine needs rather than conventional expectations about royal splendor. Their approach to Ayodhya creates excitement that ripples outward from the city like stones thrown into still water. Lookouts posted on distant towers, since news of Lanka's victory arrived through supernatural messengers, now sound horns that have waited 14 years to announce the return that was promised but never guaranteed. The notes carry across fields where farmers pause in their work to listen, into workshops where artisans set down their tools to rush into streets, through schools where children abandon lessons to join the growing crowds that stream toward the city's gates. Bharata emerges from the palace where he has maintained reluctant regency with the wooden sandals that have symbolized his brother's rightful authority throughout the years of separation. His tears of joy at seeing the approaching aerial chariot make unnecessary any formal ceremony of power transfer. For his first words establish the foundation upon which legitimate rule will now rest. My king returns to claim what was always his by right. Let no one say that Bharata sought to usurp what duty required him to guard. The reunion between the four brothers unfolds with emotion that transforms political ceremony into family celebration. Yet their embrace carries deeper significance as representatives of different aspects of righteous governance now unite to create administration that serves justice rather than mere efficiency. Each brother brings unique gifts forged through distinct experiences during their separation. Bharata's understanding of domestic administration, Shatrughna's knowledge of military affairs, the crown prince's wisdom earned through exile, and his devoted companion's appreciation for loyalty's central role in effective leadership. The queen's joy at seeing their children restored creates scenes that remind observers of the human foundations underlying all political structures. Kausalya's tears as she embraces her eldest son speak of maternal love that has endured uncertainty and fear, with faith that Dharma would ultimately protect those who serve it faithfully. Sumitra's reunion with her surviving child combines grief for dangers he has faced with pride in the man those trials have created. Even Kaikeyi, whose demands created the original crisis, finds herself welcomed back into family unity that forgiveness has made possible despite the pain her choices inflicted. The coronation preparations that follow create spectacle that surpasses even the elaborate ceremonies originally planned 14 years earlier. For this celebration carries emotional weight that mere protocol could never generate. Citizens who have awaited this day through years of uncertainty now witness the fulfillment of promises that sustained hope when circumstances suggested that royal authority might never return to rightful hands. The ritual itself combines ancient tradition with innovations that reflect lessons learned during the intervening years of trial and growth. The sacred fires burn with flames that seem to reach toward heaven in gratitude, while mantras chanted by assembled priests create harmonics that resonate through dimensions beyond ordinary perception. The crown placed upon the new king's head carries blessings from every sage and holy man whose prayers have sustained the cause of righteousness through its darkest hours. Yet the true significance of the ceremony lies not in its external magnificence, but in the principles that will guide the administration now beginning. The vows spoken before sacred fires and assembled witnesses establish standards that transform kingship from mere exercise of power into sacred service that acknowledges accountability to forces greater than royal will or popular opinion. I promise to serve truth rather than convenience, justice rather than advantage, the welfare of all subjects rather than the preferences of any particular group, the new monarch declares, with voice that carries to every corner of the vast assembly. May the gods witness these commitments and withdraw their support should I ever violate the trust that this crown represents. The reign that follows these vows creates the golden age that poets will celebrate as long as stories of perfect governance continue to inspire hope in hearts burdened by experience of corruption and incompetence. Every policy serves principles rather than expedient calculations, while every decision reflects consideration of its effects upon the weakest as well as the strongest members of society. Administrative reforms establish systems that function with efficiency, born from clarity about fundamental purposes rather than mere bureaucratic procedure. Courts dispense justice based on evidence and law, rather than influence or bribery, while tax collection serves genuine public needs instead of enriching officials who view their positions as opportunities for personal gain. Military forces receive training that emphasizes protection of citizens over conquest of neighbors, creating security that encourages commerce and cultural development. The capital itself transforms as prosperity, based on justice, replaces the artificial magnificence that often characterizes royal cities. Streets remain clean because citizens take pride in their surroundings, rather than because harsh penalties punish neglect. Markets flourish because honest dealing receives protection, while fraud faces swift correction. Schools and temples multiply because education and spiritual development receive support that acknowledges their importance for creating citizens capable of self-governance. Most remarkably, the harmony between ruler and subjects creates an atmosphere where individual virtue reinforces social order rather than conflicting with public requirements. Citizens discover that personal integrity serves their own interests while contributing to collective welfare, making law enforcement largely unnecessary because moral education has addressed root causes of antisocial behavior. This integration of private conscience with public good represents the highest achievement of political philosophy translated into practical governance. The royal household provides a model of domestic harmony that extends its influence throughout society as couples observe how mutual respect and shared commitment to principles larger than personal preference can create relationships that strengthen rather than burden those who participate in them. The love between the king and queen, tested by trials that would have destroyed lesser bonds, now serves as inspiration for marriages based on virtue rather than mere physical attraction or social convenience. Their daily routines demonstrate how even exalted positions can be lived according to dharmic principles, when duty takes precedence over pleasure and service outweighs privilege. Dawn brings private devotions that maintain spiritual foundation, while morning audiences provide access for any subject who seeks justice or assistance. Afternoons include consultation with ministers and experts whose advice informs policies that serve long-term welfare rather than immediate popularity. Evenings often find the royal couple walking through the city's streets in simple dress, observing conditions that might escape official reports while maintaining contact with citizens whose lives their decisions directly affect. These informal inspections reveal both the success of their policies and areas requiring improvement, creating feedback systems that prevent the isolation from reality that often afflicts rulers surrounded by courtiers more interested in gaining favor than reporting truth. The prosperity that results from such governance extends beyond material abundance to encompass cultural and spiritual flowering that makes the realm attractive to scholars, artists, and seekers from throughout the known world. Universities that welcome students, regardless of birth or wealth, become centers of learning that advance human knowledge, while temples that emphasize practice rather than mere ritual provide spiritual guidance that transforms individual lives and communities alike. Yet even in this golden age, careful observers might detect signs of challenges that will test the foundations upon which such perfection rests. The very success of righteous rule creates expectations that may prove impossible to maintain when circumstances change or when succession requires transfer of authority to those whose virtues, however genuine, may not match the extraordinary standards established by the current administration. More troubling, rumors begin circulating among the population about the Queen's experiences during her captivity, whispers that question whether the fire trial truly resolved all doubts about her conduct, while imprisoned among beings whose corruption might have affected even the most virtuous captive. These doubts, however unfounded, create undercurrents of suspicion that threaten to undermine the harmony that has made ideal governance possible. The king's internal struggle, as these whispers reach his ears, reveals the tragic conflict between personal knowledge and public responsibility that can make even the most righteous rulers face impossible choices. His absolute certainty about his wife's virtue wars against understanding that a monarch's decisions must sometimes serve broader considerations than private conviction, no matter how painful such calculations become for those required to make them. The crisis deepens when a washerwoman's casual comment reaches royal ears through the intelligence networks that responsible rulers maintain to stay informed about public sentiment. Her words, spoken without malicious intent but reflecting widespread doubts, cut deeper than any enemy's sword. I wonder how our queen can live with her husband after spending so much time in another man's house. If my wife did that, I certainly wouldn't take her back. The significance of such comments lies not in their truth or falsehood, but in their revelation of attitudes that could destroy the moral authority upon which legitimate governance depends. If subjects begin questioning the royal family's virtue, the foundation of trust that makes voluntary obedience possible erodes, potentially requiring the use of force to maintain order that should flow naturally from mutual respect between rulers and ruled. The royal couple's private discussion of this crisis unfolds with pain that makes their previous sufferings seem almost bearable by comparison. Public challenges can be met with courage and determination, but doubts that strike at the heart of their relationship threaten foundations that have supported them through every previous trial. The people's faith in our virtue matters more than our personal happiness, the king declares, with voice that struggles against emotions threatening to overwhelm his resolve. If my continued association with you creates doubts about our family's moral standards, perhaps separation serves the greater good, despite the personal cost such sacrifice would require. Her response reveals both the nobility that has sustained her through every trial and the human anguish that makes such virtue precious rather than merely admirable. I understand the duties that kingship imposes and will not allow personal desires to compromise the welfare of subjects who deserve leadership they can respect without reservation. If my presence creates obstacles to effective governance, then love itself demands that I remove those obstacles regardless of my own preferences. The decision that emerges from their consultation represents Dharma's most cruel requirement, that those who serve the highest principles sometimes sacrifice their deepest joys to maintain standards that lesser souls could never comprehend or appreciate. The separation that follows will test not only their personal strength, but society's capacity to distinguish between appearance and reality, between gossip and truth. The Queen's departure from the palace unfolds with dignity that transforms personal tragedy into moral instruction for all who witness or hear about her sacrifice. Her acceptance of exile, despite vindication through divine trial, demonstrates commitment to principles that transcend individual welfare, while her husband's anguish at enforcing such separation reveals the human cost of leadership that serves justice rather than personal preference. She travels toward the hermitage of Valmiki, the sage whose spiritual achievement has qualified him to serve as guardian for those whose virtue requires protection from a world not yet evolved enough to recognize purity when circumstances create superficial doubts. The forest sanctuary, where she will find refuge, represents return to the simple life that had brought them such happiness. before duty called them back to complexities that make virtue difficult to maintain and even harder to demonstrate convincingly. Behind her, she leaves a king whose perfect administration continues serving the public good, while his private life bears wounds that remind him daily of prices that righteousness sometimes demands from those who serve, causes greater than personal contentment. The empty chambers that once echoed with her laughter now stand as monuments to sacrifice that makes heroism possible, but exacts tolls that victory cannot repay. The kingdom prospers even as its rulers suffer, creating the paradox that often characterizes periods when moral leadership guides societies toward their highest potential, despite personal costs that such guidance requires from those who provide it. Citizens enjoy benefits of justice and prosperity, while remaining largely unaware of the private anguish that sustains public policies serving their welfare. Years pass in this bitter mixture of public triumph and private loss, with administrative success measuring progress towards social goals, while personal happiness becomes casualty of principles that demand subordination of individual desires to collective needs. The separation that was meant to preserve moral authority achieves its intended purpose while creating different problems that no amount of righteous intention could have anticipated or prevented. The stage is set for trials that will test whether love, separated by duty, can survive years of isolation, whether children born in exile can find their way back to inheritance that circumstances have placed beyond their immediate reach, and whether even the most perfect administration can endure when its foundations rest upon sacrifices that extract prices no society should demand from those who serve it faithfully. The golden age continues, but shadows lengthen as challenges approach that will test every assumption upon which prosperity and justice currently rest. The wheel of Dharma turns toward destinies that remain hidden, despite distance already traveled and victories already achieved through unity, that separation now threatens to undermine beyond any possibility of restoration. In the sacred groves of Valmiki's hermitage, where ancient trees weave canopies that filter divine light into patterns of gold and shadow, a new chapter begins in the eternal story of love, tested by duty and virtue, refined through suffering. The exiled queen finds sanctuary among disciples whose lives revolve around pursuits that transcend worldly concerns. Their days measured not by political events, but by the slow rhythms of spiritual growth and natural cycles that govern forest life. The sage himself, whose transformation from highway robber to revered teacher represents one of history's most remarkable redemptions, welcomes the royal refugee with compassion that asks no questions while providing everything necessary for both physical comfort and spiritual healing. His hermitage has long served as haven for those whose virtue has placed them at odds with a world not yet evolved enough to recognize purity when circumstances create superficial confusion. Here, he tells her, as he shows her to quarters that combine simplicity with dignity appropriate to her station, you may live according to nature's laws rather than society's expectations. The trees care nothing for gossip, while the rivers judge only by the purity of hearts that seek their blessings. In time, truth will vindicate itself as it always does, though the hour of revelation may seem distant to those who suffer while waiting. The months that follow create routine that gradually transforms exile from punishment into liberation, from artificial complexities that had made authentic life increasingly difficult. Dawn brings prayers beside streams that carry no burden of human judgment, while days pass in simple activities that connect body and spirit to rhythms older than civilization itself. The community of seekers provides companionship based on shared commitment to principles rather than social position or political advantage. Yet even in this peaceful retreat, destiny continues weaving patterns that will ultimately restore justice, while demonstrating truth's power to survive any temporary eclipse that circumstances might create. The signs appear first as subtle changes in the exile's health that experienced midwives recognize despite her initial unawareness of their significance. Life grows within her, carrying forward the royal lineage through children who will inherit nobility from both parents, while facing challenges that will test every virtue such heritage implies. The birth of twins transforms the hermitage into something approaching a palace, as joy at these miraculous arrivals spreads through the community of ascetics who understand the cosmic significance of such events. The boys emerge into the world with beauty that reflects their divine ancestry, while displaying temperaments that suggest futures filled with extraordinary achievements. Their very presence seems to brighten the forest itself, as if nature celebrates the arrival of souls destined for greatness. Valmiki assumes responsibility for their education with devotion that transforms the renowned sage into something approaching a grandfather, his austere features softening whenever the children approach with questions that reveal minds already grappling with concepts far beyond their apparent years. Under his guidance, they master not only conventional subjects like mathematics and history, but also the deepest mysteries of Dharmic philosophy and the practical skills necessary for leadership in a world where virtue must often contend with corruption. These boys, he tells their mother, as he watches them practice archery with accuracy that seems impossible for children their age, carry within themselves the potential to restore balance to a world that has lost sight of fundamental principles. Their education must prepare them not merely for royal inheritance, but for the cosmic responsibilities that such positions entail. The sage's most remarkable contribution to their development comes through his composition of the epic poem that chronicles their parents' extraordinary story. Night after night, the hermitage echoes with verses that transform recent history into immortal literature, while the children listen with fascination to tales of their own heritage told in language that captures both heroic grandeur and intimate human emotion. This is your legacy, Valmiki explains as he teaches them to recite the endless verses that comprise the Ramayana itself, not merely the political inheritance that bloodline might provide, but the spiritual heritage that comes from parents who chose duty over desire, principle over convenience, service over self-interest. Learn these stories well, for someday you may need to remind the world of truths that comfort often causes people to forget. Years pass in this remarkable education as the twins grow into young men whose abilities exceed even their teachers' ambitious expectations. Their mastery of weapons rivals that of seasoned warriors, while their understanding of statecraft demonstrates wisdom that experienced ministers might envy. More importantly, their character reflects perfect integration of strength with compassion, authority with humility, courage with self-restraint. Meanwhile, in Ayodhya's golden halls, their father continues governing with justice that maintains prosperity, while his personal life bears wounds that grow deeper rather than healing with time's passage. The empty chambers that once echoed with beloved laughter now serve as constant reminders of costs that righteous leadership sometimes demands from those who serve, causes greater than individual happiness. His attempts to fill the void through administrative excellence achieve remarkable success in public terms, while failing completely to address private anguish that no amount of social achievement can relieve. The kingdom flourishes under policies that serve every citizen's welfare, yet its ruler suffers from loneliness that victory cannot cure, an isolation that duty has made necessary, but no less painful for being voluntary. The crisis that will reunite the separated family approaches through the ritual requirements that kingship periodically imposes upon rulers who must demonstrate their worthiness through ceremonies that connect earthly authority to cosmic order. The Ashvamedha Yajna, most elaborate of all royal sacrifices, demands preparations that consume months, while symbolically establishing the monarch's sovereignty over territories as vast as the consecrated horse can wander without challenge. The sacrifice's deeper purpose involves more than mere political demonstration, serving as spiritual purification that renews the connection between ruler and divine sources of legitimate authority. Yet the ritual's complex requirements create practical problems that no amount of planning could have anticipated, particularly when the ceremonial horse wanders into territories controlled by inhabitants who recognize no obligation to respect claims based on distant kingship. The young warriors who challenge the horse's passage and defeat the armies sent to protect it possess skills that astound even experienced military commanders, through combinations of supernatural ability with tactical intelligence that suggests training far beyond anything available through conventional education. Their victory over forces that include some of the kingdom's most accomplished soldiers creates mystery that demands investigation by authorities, whose curiosity grows stronger as reports emphasize the extraordinary nature of these opponents. "Send word to the capital," instructs the defeated general as he surveys casualties that represent some of the realm's finest warriors. "The king must know that we face adversaries who fight like gods while appearing to be little more than boys. Their abilities suggest training that only the greatest masters could provide. Yet we can find no record of such warriors in any kingdom known to our intelligence services." The report that reaches the royal court creates excitement mixed with apprehension, as ministers struggle to understand how unknown fighters could defeat forces that have proven victorious against experienced armies from neighboring realms. The descriptions of their appearance and fighting style trigger memories that the king has tried to suppress, resembling figures from dreams that torment his sleep, with visions of what might have been if different choices had been made years ago. The decision to investigate personally rather than sending additional forces reflects both royal curiosity and subconscious hope that some impossible miracle might emerge from circumstances that seem to promise only additional military complications. The journey toward the site of these mysterious encounters becomes pilgrimage toward destiny that has waited years for proper timing to reveal itself through events that appear accidental but follow patterns too precise for mere coincidence. The confrontation unfolds with dramatic irony that transforms routine military operations into cosmic theater, where fundamental questions about justice, duty, and the ultimate triumph of truth will receive answers that have been postponed for far too long. The young warriors who emerge from the forest to challenge royal authority move with grace that seems to make combat into dance, their weapons singing through air with precision that suggests divine guidance rather than merely human training. Their leader addresses the assembled court with voice that carries authority despite his apparent youth, while his words reveal knowledge of political and spiritual matters that only the finest education could provide. We have no quarrel with Ayodhya's citizens or soldiers, but we cannot permit this sacrifice to proceed until certain moral questions receive proper resolution. A king who abandons his queen based on popular gossip rather than divine judgment lacks the spiritual authority necessary for ceremonies that connect earthly rule to cosmic order. The challenge strikes at the foundation of royal legitimacy, while demonstrating understanding of dharmic principles that few scholars could match, much less warriors young enough to be students rather than teachers. Their combination of military prowess with philosophical sophistication creates puzzles that conventional analysis cannot solve, suggesting backgrounds far more complex than their apparent circumstances would indicate. The revelation of their identity emerges gradually through details that accumulate until recognition becomes inevitable despite initial disbelief. Their features, their mannerisms, their instinctive nobility of bearing, all combine to create growing certainty about relationships that circumstances have kept hidden for years, while destiny prepared for reunion under conditions that would vindicate virtue, while demonstrating truth's ultimate triumph over temporary confusion. The moment of recognition transforms military confrontation into family reunion as the king acknowledges sons whose existence he had not suspected, while their mother emerges from forest concealment to witness the vindication that patience and faith have finally achieved. The twins' initial hostility gives way to wonder as they discover that the opponent they have challenged represents the father, whose abandonment of their mother had seemed to justify their resentment. "My sons," he whispers, with voice that struggles against emotions too powerful for easy expression. "Forgive the father who allowed duty to override love, when wisdom should have found ways to serve both without sacrificing either. Your mother's virtue needed no public demonstration, yet I permitted others' doubts to create separation that has caused suffering no righteousness could justify." Their response reveals character formation that has transformed potential bitterness into compassion, capable of understanding complexities that simpler minds would find unforgivable. "We have learned your story through verses that sage Valmiki composed to preserve truth for generations, who might otherwise forget the prices that virtue sometimes demands from those who serve it faithfully. Your choices, however painful, served principles larger than personal preference." The reunion that follows combines joy with tragedy, as years of separation yield to moments of perfect understanding. Yet the recognition comes too late to undo damage that time and circumstance have made irreversible. The Queen's response to her husband's plea for forgiveness reveals spiritual evolution that has carried her beyond desire for restoration to earlier conditions, finding peace in acceptance of patterns that mortal understanding cannot fully comprehend. "My beloved king and husband," she declares with dignity that transforms personal statement into cosmic pronouncement, "I have no need for vindication from those who doubted, nor desire for return to circumstances that demanded such painful choices. The earth that gave me birth now calls me home to rest, that transcends all earthly joys and sorrows alike." Her final prayer creates miracle that witnesses will remember as long as stories of divine intervention continue to inspire faith in hearts tested by seemingly impossible circumstances. The ground opens to receive one whose purity has earned her release from cycles of birth and death that bind lesser souls to endless rounds of suffering, relieved only by temporary pleasures that ultimately fail to satisfy the spirit's deepest longings. Mother Earth herself rises to embrace the daughter whose virtue has justified the trust placed in mortal guardianship, while flowers rain from clear skies and celestial music fills air with harmonies that celebrate reunion between divine essence and its source. The Queen's departure represents not death, but transformation, liberation from physical existence that had served its purpose while pointing toward realities that transcend material manifestation. The king's grief at this final separation combines with understanding that true love sometimes requires acceptance of endings that serve purposes beyond human comprehension. His wife's choice demonstrates wisdom that has learned to distinguish between attachment that binds and love that liberates, showing how the highest relationships ultimately point beyond themselves toward truths that individual happiness cannot fully contain. The years that follow witness governance that achieves even greater heights of justice and prosperity, while carrying undertones of melancholy that reflect awareness of life's fundamental impermanence. The realm flourishes under policies that serve eternal principles rather than temporary expedients. Yet its ruler bears within himself knowledge of prices that virtue demands and rewards that transcend earthly measurement. His sons assume increasing responsibility for administration that will eventually pass to their capable hands. Their education in both forest wisdom and court necessity, preparing them for leadership that can balance competing demands without sacrificing essential principles to practical convenience. Their presence provides continuity that ensures righteous governance will survive transition while adapting to changing circumstances that require fresh approaches to eternal challenges. The approach of the king's own departure becomes apparent through signs that only the spiritually sensitive can detect. A gradual withdrawal from worldly engagement, increasing time spent in meditation and prayer, growing detachment from outcomes that once seemed crucially important for personal and political success. His preparations reveal understanding that earthly authority represents temporary stewardship rather than permanent possession. The final scene unfolds beside the sacred Sarayu River, where the royal family had once celebrated births that seemed to promise endless happiness. The king walks into waters that flow toward oceanic vastness, his physical form dissolving into light that merges with sunset colors, painting sky and water in hues that have no earthly names. His departure represents not death, but return, homecoming to divine realms, where his essence originated before accepting incarnation for purposes now fulfilled. The transformation that follows creates wonder rather than grief, as witnesses understand that they observe not ending, but completion, not loss, but fulfillment of destiny that required earthly experience to achieve its intended purpose. The king's return to divine status validates every choice that had seemed to demand impossible sacrifices, while demonstrating that true heroism lies not in avoiding suffering, but in accepting whatever burdens righteousness requires. His brothers follow in similar fashion as their own missions reach completion, each departure adding to the growing understanding that the entire epic represents cosmic drama, played out through human characters whose apparent individuality masks universal truths about the nature of duty, love, and the ultimate triumph of Dharma over forces that temporarily oppose it. The kingdom continues under new leadership that maintains principles established through examples too powerful to ignore or abandon, while the stories of its founders enter eternal literature that will inspire countless generations, with models of virtue that transcend cultural boundaries and historical limitations. The Ramayana itself becomes immortal teaching that shows how ordinary humans can embody divine qualities when circumstances demand heroic response to challenges that test every assumption about the relationship between individual happiness and cosmic responsibility. In forest hermitages and palace halls, in marketplaces and temples, wherever human hearts seek guidance for living, according to principles that honor the sacred nature of existence itself, the tales continue echoing with power that time cannot diminish. The story ends where it began, with recognition that love and duty, properly understood, serve the same eternal source from which all righteousness flows like light from the sun, that illuminates all worlds while remaining forever beyond the shadows that temporary circumstances create. The great epic concludes, but its truths remain eternal, carved into human consciousness by characters whose struggles and triumphs demonstrate that divine nature can manifest through mortal lives when wisdom guides action and compassion tempers strength. The wheel of Dharma turns onward toward futures that will require new heroes, while drawing inspiration from examples that prove righteousness, however tested, ultimately prevails, because it alone aligns with the fundamental nature of existence itself. Thus ends the entire story of the Ramayana, tale of love and duty, exile and return, separation and reunion, sacrifice and vindication, death and transcendence. The echoes of its wisdom continue reverberating through hearts that seek truth, minds that pursue justice, and souls that aspire toward the divine potential that lies dormant within every human being, awaiting circumstances that call forth greatness from the depths of ordinary existence. Jai Shri Rama.
Deccan Picks.